Afternoon and welcome back. I'd like to reconvene the meeting, the Planning Commission meeting for December 10th. And we are still on item 2015-029D, appeal by Ford Construction and CB Asphalt. And we were still in commissioner deliberations, and I believe that when we left, Kelly, you had said you wanted to talk about odors?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Betzer, your report says that both the Kabahi report and the York report acknowledge that there is a potential for orders from the plant, assuming normal operating conditions.
What page
Yeah.
are you on, Kelly?
Yeah, speak up a little, Kelly, too. Thank you.
Okay, I'm on page 6. I wasn't able to find a reference in the York report to potential odors from the plant. Do you have a note or something that will tell me where that is?
Potential odors at the plant. What are you looking for?
A reference in the York report to the potential for odors from the plant.
It was in the November 3rd or 4th submittal.
Commissioner Wooster, you're asking where in the York report they discuss odors?
At the plant.
Oh, at the plant, okay.
And then
Because the
just
York-
the transportation of it.
I'm just looking at page, for whatever it's worth, page 18 of 21 in the York report that was submitted on November 4th.
Yes,
I'm
odors.
not completely clear on whether that was related to the stationary plant or not. I don't know the science of it.
Well, the entire report deals with the transport, and the odor section deals with the transport, and I couldn't find a reference where they were
So
asked to or did consider odors from the plant.
it was brought up in their report. They talked, Rule 205, York talks about regarding Rule 205, which is the stationary source for rule for nuisance, which includes odors. And they acknowledge there's the potential for odors from the processes.
It's page 8.
And that was on page 18. And then they reference the San Joaquin air pollution control district's reference to it being regarding the sensitive receptors and nuisance. Is that on page? Yeah, on page 8, that's where or on page 9.
But they don't purport to analyze odors from the plant at all, do they?
They weren't asked to.
Correct. And so therefore, it's, it's not surprising that there's no detailed analysis by York of any emissions from the plant, correct?
Correct.
All right. Did you people ask them to conduct an analysis of odors from the plant?
No, we did not.
All right. Now, York did analyze odors during the truck transport, is that correct?
During transportation, yes.
Yeah. And their conclusion was that the odors were expected to be less than significant, is that right?
Yes, expected to be less than significant.
Okay. Do you have any basis to doubt the competence or the quality of work done by York?
And that was based on the 2 incoming trucks. Okay, just for the record. It was based on the 2 incoming trucks in that report and not any of the outgoing vehicles. So on their analysis of the transportation and the quality of work, there's just the difference of the November 4th report of 2 and versus the November 30th of 6, and then looking at incoming trucks and not outgoing trucks.
Do you have any reason to believe that their conclusion would be different?
No.
Okay. Is there any other analysis, actual analysis of the odor issues at the plant or during the truck transport, other than the York analysis?
Our engineer looked at, in his report, what's the report on that one? The analysis, I know the York report, they did not do a specific study on the stationary source. They referenced the San Joaquin County Air Pollution Control District's guidelines for odors and stationary sources, and whether in the criteria to be used if there may be a significant effect. And so we just added that table to further, add the material that they referenced and looking at other districts and what they use for a further analysis of a application if it is within that radius of receptors for odors. And then our Mr. Kapahai, where's that? In his report on page 8,
Which of his reports?
this Kapahai?
Yes,
our
but
engineer-
which of his three that we have?
Yeah, I'm getting the date for you, Mr. Tuno. The May 18th, when he looked at the engineering evaluation,
Page?
page 8, and noted that there is the potential for orders from these processes.
Yes, was he asked to do any further analysis other than that one sentence?
No, he was not.
All right. That's it for me on odors.
And Mr. Kapahai, if we're looking at the same section, this is his Rule 205 nuisance section, correct? His conclusion, these results indicate that the project impacts to public health would not be significant to residents within a half-mile site.
Yes, and that's based on health risks that we mentioned earlier in the presentation.
Cumulative health risks would not be significant, in his opinion.
Assuming operational compliance, correct.
Now, with respect to outgoing trucks, this is where I want to do a little math here,
Okay.
because I want to get to the net truck traffic. And I mentioned before the break that we have existing truck traffic carrying asphalt to the county, job sites wherever they are. And that's been going on forever, coming from the outside. Assuming that asphalt isn't used any more in the future than it has been, and assuming that it isn't used any more because we have an asphalt plant in the county than we didn't have one, the total impact of trucks carrying asphalt, would it not be the same after as before?
Assuming that every job, every contractor purchases their asphalt from the asphalt plant.
I'm making that assumption too.
So
That instead of it
everybody
coming,
in Calaveras County has to purchase their asphalt from the asphalt plant.
or whether the same buyer, the mix of buyers, some of them bought from this new plant, proposed new plant, or some of them continued buying from a previous supplier, which they would have the right to do. They can do whatever they want. They have relationships. The mix is still the same. It's really the amount of asphalt that gets end up being used in the county is the same.
As far as being used is the same.
Well, the amount used is the amount purchased and the amount transported through the county one way or another.
The amount transported could be different. If you have people buying from the plant and outside of the county, and you have people buying, and we have jobs in the county, and you have people buying outside the county, so now you have an increase of trucks coming in and an increase of trucks that normally weren't going out of county, now going out of county.
Okay, so the possible net increase, possible, is from new customers outside the county buying from our in-county supplier.
Correct.
And those new customers, those additional customers would potentially buy from this new supplier, CB Asphalt, because CB Asphalt is closer to their job site than is some other supplier. Because with respect to asphalt, proximity makes a big difference, doesn't it?
Proximity does make a big difference.
Makes all the difference in the world, correct?
Correct.
Because the asphalt has to arrive at a job site hot. And isn't it not true that in our county, the asphalt sometimes does not arrive at the job site hot because it's had to come from too great a distance, and what the county ends up buying is what's called in the industry cold patch.
I'm not an asphalt expert or work with Public Works as far as purchasing asphalt. I understand some of the trucks may be heated. That's a better question for the Public Works Director, and I can't answer that. So.
Okay. Did Mr. Kapahi show up here today? Was he asked to attend?
No, he's not here. He's in the process of moving.
Okay. Was he burned out?
No, he was not.
Okay. So, okay, net truck traffic is the same with these exceptions. 2 trucks of carrying the liquid bitumen, on average, would come in a day.
6 was the latest that we had heard, but 2, we could go 2 with average, sure.
6 represents maximum production from the plant.
Yep, 2 on
Okay, that's
average.
another thing I'm trying to get at, is the plant's not going to operate at maximum production all year long, correct? There's some
Correct.
reasonable level of production, and I thought that's where the 2 came from. That's not true?
When we were asked, the 2 might be average. I have to go back and look at it. Looking at, we wanted to look at accurate readings for determination on the quantity and the method, type of use and process at the facility. And again, looking at that local environmental, which there may be the ability to have a local impact to that area.
Is that a yes?
As far as the 2 is average, sure. I mean,
Okay.
that's a better question for the.
I agree, that they
Yes.
can maybe clear up this average truckload
Yes.
business. So it would be those numbers of trucks, whether it's 2, whatever it is, plus the speculation that somebody from the outside our county, might buy from this supplier,
Correct.
correct? Otherwise, all of the effects of blacktop in trucks being transported in the county is the same. It's a net zero. The blacktop, not the bitumen, the blacktop.
Until we look at it, I'm not going to, that's, it could be the same. It could be the same.
Okay.
But mind you, when we're looking at it, we're looking at what's leaving the plant. We're looking at the plant itself and not looking.
I understand, but whether it leaves this plant or it leaves some other plant and drives through our county, that's what my point is. It's the same number of trucks. And right now, the truck traffic comes from outside the county through our county, correct?
Correct.
And when it's doing that, it's passing by hundreds, if not thousands, of homes, correct?
Yes, depending on the route.
But depending on where they're going, but
There's
at
a lot of
least,
variables, yeah.
but at least hundreds of homes just to get into the county, correct?
Correct.
Would it be fair to say that most of that truck traffic comes on Highway 12 from Clements into, and then it gets dispersed from there?
I can't answer that because I don't know the traffic routes of what asphalt plants coming in and out. George Reed has a plant, over off of Old Burns Ferry Road.
Yeah.
So that's, I don't know.
Well, I was referring to the one because I live in that end of the county, the George Reed Clements plant.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming for them to get into the county, they're coming up Highway 12.
Well, their plant's actually in Tuolumne County, not in Clements. Yeah, they have one in both counties, so,
It's Clements.
yeah. No, and Tuolumne County.
Oh, and Tuolumne County.
Yes.
Okay, so they're coming in from a couple, 2 or 3 different routes to get into our county to deliver the asphalt. And they're passing by homes, hundreds of homes, if not thousands, in the process of doing that. And that's been going on for decades. So one of my questions to you is, what complaints has your department, prior to your being in the department perhaps, I'm sure, you haven't been there that long, complaints of odor from that aspect of the operation?
You know, I can't answer that without looking back at our records as far as mobile transportation. I would guess that our complaints from transportation would be less compared to the actual job site, so.
Okay, job site.
Correct.
Okay, the stuff gets laid on the road, right? And we've all been stopped in one of those lines where the flagman holds up and you got to wait for a while, and then you're allowed to pass through, and maybe you've got a half a mile to go while passing by the lane that they've been paving, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that's what you mean by the job site,
Correct.
right? What volume of complaints have people registered about that aspect of blacktop paving?
I'd have to go back and look at our complaint records and searching those, especially because I wasn't part of the air district prior. I don't know if Corey has information to answer that at this point in time. So, you know, when we look at, you know, the order in our document, and not to take you away from where you're going with your questioning, is when we look at, in our determination, is from the plant itself. Okay, and yes, our engineer we looked at odors as part of it, as mobile transportation.
Sure.
But also, primarily, we're looking not in our 035 determination, is looking at the operations of the plant and ancillary operations with it, but didn't look at global projects throughout the county.
Okay, so you did not look at any history of odor complaints from blacktop from mobile.
Yeah, and we don't, it would come in as one is, we did not look at the complaints regarding mobile, and we do not regulate the mobile, but if it was a nuisance complaint, you know, the district would respond to those complaints. So we don't regulate the mobile transport and/or the work activity at a specific job site within the county. But if somebody was complaining, we have received complaints regarding improper storage or asphalt people where we had a runoff of oil into neighboring properties from job sites. So we have had those, and we're getting off topic because it's not about, we're not talking about the plant, we're talking about specifically jobs where people paved within the county. But those weren't odor related, they were hazardous substance related as it was applied to the ground.
Okay, I guess maybe I'm mistaken, but I thought total emissions and odor from the mobile aspect of the business was an important part of your analysis.
We did look at it all, correct, but it's not the only thing that we based it on.
Kind of a big picture issue, if you will. We've talked about what happened in our previous hearing, where you were given some direction. The position that the health department took was not acceptable to the commission. We gave you some direction, and now you've come back to us with this report. And the direction included consider mitigating factors, correct? In the broadest sense of the word.
Existing rules and regulations.
Yeah, I thought, my memory was mitigating factors, including those, but you took it to mean rules and regulations only. That's just a bad memory on my part. I thought it was mitigating factors total.
And we looked at, mitigating factors, we did look at their bag house, which is not part of regulations.
Okay.
So yes, that is included.
Okay.
So
So having done that, how did it affect your analysis previous to this paper, previous to this position, to this staff report? How did that new analysis, those new components factor in, and how did it affect you?
okay, so what we did is we looked at, prior was, when looked at it, and Mr. Moss was absence of rules and regulations for 035 determination. Directed by the Planning Commission was with including rules and regulations. And so we looked at the method, the type, quantity of use, materials processed at the site, including environment and receptors, and looked at how they can comply. And even with, with the inescapable, with them complying with all the rules and regulations, you still, in our ruling, that there's ability of the facility based on, thousands gallon of diesel and the asphalt oil tank and the amount being processed at the facility, air emissions, odors, everything that went into it, that there may be a significant effect on the environment.
Is that, are you saying there was zero effect of looking at the impact of rules and regulations that they have to follow? Was there,
No, there was impact with it. There was impact.
Okay.
There was impact because we looked at, what our engineer said, what their engineer said. The compliance with hazardous material was a little difficult because the number was changing throughout the submittals. Again, but still with the quantity being used, whether I said the lower amount was the 5,800 gallons for diesel or the 18,000 gallons for asphalt oil, even with compliance, there is still the possibility of operational and mechanical error, and due to the extent of materials where they may have a significant effect on the environment.
okay, and the reason I ask is that there was certainly a big issue with the commission that you performed this analysis, and you agree with that.
Correct.
And it's in your staff report that you've done that, okay? But what I don't find in the staff report is, having looked at these regs, we now find this is much less of an issue. This one still bothers us. This one over here went down dramatically. This one here didn't. I don't get that from you. I don't get the effect of the regulation. All I get is the result. The end result is you still feel a problem exists, and the problem that you've identified many times is the accident factor, which we weren't looking at really before.
I would say operational incidents that can occur during the operations, whether it's an accident, mechanical failure. I mean, it's a matter of terminology, but we did take that into consideration.
Okay. I'm not apologizing for you using the word accidents, mishaps, okay, whatever, mishaps. Okay, so what it all boils down to is, again, my problem with the report is I don't get the effect of those considerations. I get your bottom line, and you say to get to the bottom line, you performed you looked at these considerations, but I don't see the effect of them. I just see the end result.
I mean, if looking at the hazardous material business plan that was submitted, whether the information was accurate or not accurate with the different submittals, it complies with the laws. The intent is to protect emergency responders. So if there was an incident there, they would know the amount stored, and where it's, and as far as the location, if the site map is correct. Some of the site maps that were submitted were incomplete and did not show the tanks and the tank change. So with the compliance with 6.95 in the state law, yes, they would comply for emergency planning once they submitted, and assuming that they submitted everything correctly, for a fire department to respond to the facility and deal in protecting public safety. That does not take away that there still may be, from an incident, a significant effect to the environment.
You sound like you want to jump in, and I've got one to...
I've got a couple of specific questions here. I think your staff report says that the York report didn't look at the effect of outgoing asphalt transportation in terms of emissions,
Correct.
and didn't estimate the TACs, I guess that's toxic air contaminants, from either the diesel or the asphalt oil,
Correct.
right? But York did estimate the emissions on the ingoing truckloads of asphalt oil, right?
Correct.
And they did that assuming that they spilled a whole truckload. And then they looked at what would be released.
I'd have to go back. and looked at, if it was all, they did mention if there was a release all at one time. I don't
Right.
say of hydrogen sulfide specifically. They did not, the release was not asphalt oil. It was, looking at hydrogen sulfide specifically, which is a byproduct of the asphalt oil.
Right, that's right. But they also then said that the hot mix contains only 5 to 10% petroleum asphalt by weight. So would that not imply that the fugitive emissions from the hot mix going out would be much less than if you dumped a load of liquid asphalt and released all the hydrogen sulfide at once?
Mathematically, yes, it would.
Okay. Now, on the toxic air contaminants, Kapahi did look at that. In fact, I think he said that York should have calculated that and didn't.
Correct.
And then he also said that he didn't think that the emissions would be significant, but then you went ahead and had him, Kapahi, do his own study, right?
Yes, on the December 3rd report, as far as, is that where you looked at the mobile one?
Yeah, December 3rd.
And again, they're looking at, when we're looking at these numbers too, it's the effect to public health and not to the environment as a whole in his report.
Okay, we've gone over that.
Yep.
All right, now, what he does is he says the annual TAC emissions would be the same as the annual PM-10 emissions, correct?
Correct.
And he found that the health exposure to the public was expected to be insignificant, right?
Correct.
Okay, now, when you go to the York report, they also calculated expected PM10 emissions from the transport, didn't they?
For incoming, they did.
Yes, and so if Kapahi equates PM10 with the TAC emissions, and York gave you the PM-10 emissions, they effectively gave you the TAC emissions on the incoming too, didn't they?
Yes, on the two trucks, yes.
Yes, and everybody found that those emissions were far below any standards that anybody was citing, correct?
For public health significance.
Correct.
And then reduce cancer risk.
Was there any request for York to do anything more on TAC emissions than what they did?
And did we have that? That we had that in our, November 25th email from us to Diane Kinderman, and we had a phone call in requesting the additional information.
Okay, but you got it actually from your own engineer.
Correct, correct.
Do you have any reason to question the accuracy of either what York came up with in terms of these emissions or your own engineer?
No, I do not.
Okay. Now, kind of a general question about 035 and how you look at it. I think 035 in substance says that if you look at the type, quantity, and method of use, you look to see whether there may be a significant effect on the environment. Close enough?
Yeah.
Okay. And the question I have is, in your analysis, what you think the phrase "may be" means. And let me start by saying, I think it means something more than a remote possibility, but something less than this is more likely than not to happen. How would you state how you evaluate that standard?
The ability to. So based on the method, type, and use of materials, looking at the whole process, what is the ability that it may have a significant effect on the environment?
So if it is just a very remote possibility, that satisfies the standard?
You know, as far as remote, if it ability to, it could happen. And it's also looking at everything, the quantity and the process of the materials. We got back to, you know, looking at if this was, you know, an auto body shop with a 55-gallon drum, less of a quantity there compared to the amount of diesel fuel that's being processed annually with the number of usage, even at the low end of 262,000 gallons per year. In my experience with that type of throughput, there is, and with the odors, air emissions still acknowledge that there's not an effect to human health, but the cancer risk, but it did not look at what type of, you know, risk to the environment. So, you know, looking at the quantity, the type, method of use, yes, it has the ability to have a significant effect.
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt. That was not Mr. Wooster's question. His question is very simple. He's asking you, what, in your opinion, does may have? Now,
The ability to.
in other words, he gave you an example. The remote possibility of?
You know, if we, I'm not, you know, as far as statistical analysis, it depends on every situation. So we look at it, I look at this is something that we're faced with making a determination. We make a determination that is based on science and based on the process. So, and looking at the whole plan, this has the ability, the application does. Staff reviewed it, we looked at it. We also asked colleagues outside of Calaveras County what their thoughts were on the determination and the process, and that was not only rural but urban, and it was consistent that they additionally thought there may be a significant effect based on the process. So we did ask people, other professionals, directors of environmental health, air pollution control officers. So
Is that referenced in your report?
no, it's not.
And do any of these other people have an ordinance that reads like 035?
Not to my knowledge.
If I'm getting your analysis correctly, really all you needed to know to come up with your determination was there would be diesel fuel and asphalt, the quantities involved, and it would be in an asphalt plant with liquid asphalt coming in and hot mix coming out. Once you knew those things, and that's all you needed to know, you could make and did make the determination that you did, correct?
Yeah, and we did look at the reports, yes. I mean,
Okay.
but we also did look at the reports. We looked at the information provided by the applicant. It wasn't absent of, you know, there's no containment there. If the plant is sitting on gravel, there is no containment if there was release.
Okay, let me pursue that a little bit.
So we did look at, you know, it's not just what the quantity, it wasn't just the material, the quantity. We looked at the operations. We've been to the plant. We've looked at it.
And was there anything there about that visit to the plant specifically that helped you make your determination?
You know, again, it's looking at the quantity, type, method of use. The single, what we saw there at the time is single wall piping sitting on top of the ground. We have no plan saying if it's going to be single wall or double wall, but that's what we saw. Looking at fill prevention, there's no spill prevention as they fill the tank. So we looked at all the possibilities and the processes to see, looking at the specific plant, to see if there may be, you know, an effect on the environment. And just with the process with the hazardous materials, looking at the odors and looking at the emissions, okay? And the emissions, yes, they're below, we look at below significant public health standards, but it doesn't go into looking at meteorological conditions and anything else to see what type of impact it has on receptors such as a public drinking water source.
May
Jason,
I for just 1 second?
can I ask one quick question?
Okay.
You'd mentioned you consulted with other professionals, but perhaps you could just remind us about your credentials and qualifications in this area?
Yeah. So as I took over for Brian Moss in August, I've been with Calaveras County for, 13 and a half years now. I've been manager of environmental health for 8 years. I'm a certified hazardous material technician. I helped get, when the Calaveras County became certified by the state of California to implement the hazardous material program. I was the first person that got the program up and running for the county of Calaveras, worked with businesses and implementing rules and regulations for the first time that they've ever been inspected and permitted, and served on statewide hazardous material board for the state of California and worked with other agencies, Cali PA, Department of Toxics, and have a total of 16 years in the profession. So,
Thank you.
Okay. My question relates to Mr. Wooster's question, and you've answered a couple times, 2 or 3 times, that you didn't know whether there was single wall piping or double wall piping. You saw single wall out there, and you didn't know what, you don't know where it's single wall and where it's double wall. Okay, assume it's all double wall. What difference does that make in your analysis?
all double wall, there's more containment, so that then it takes away a little bit of that risk, but it doesn't take away other that's just one aspect.
That's my, and that's what I want to do is one aspect at a time, if I may. Because if it was all, what you're saying is if it was all double wall, your analysis, your bottom line is the same.
I'd have to look at how it's monitored. We have piping leaks where there's still double wall. So I have to look at, it's not a matter of just saying it depends on the construction and the process and how it's, the whole plant is set up, so.
Okay.
And again, and also with looking at the method type of use and also the processing at the facility. Is it protected? Is it above ground? Is it underground?
Keep going there.
And again, we're going back, we're looking at 035 is that we're not saying that we're looking at it may be a significant effect on the environment. We're not saying that the plant can go at the site. We're looking at 035 for what it says and recommending our recommendation to the planning director that a use permit is required.
All right, yeah. You mentioned, I think, that there was gravel at this site,
Correct.
and is that obviously on top of the ground where the plant is?
Yes.
Do you know what's under the gravel?
No, I do not. I would make an assumption. I haven't been there before, but you can probably get Google aerial photos that it's still native ground there or the existing rock.
We were told in the last meeting, were we not?
I think it's hard rock, isn't it?
Yeah, hard rock, which can serve, if there is a release, more of a direct conduit for the contaminants or leaks to get to groundwater.
All right, depending upon which way it's sloped.
Exactly.
Did you do any analysis of whether it is hard rock, and if so, which way it's sloped?
No, I did not.
Did you ask the applicants for that information?
No.
Okay. You mentioned that you looked at both of the engineering reports
Yes.
as part of your analysis.
What's that?
As part of your analysis?
Yes.
In addition to type, quantity, and method of use.
Yeah.
Is there anywhere in either one of those reports where any of those experts say that they expect there would be a significant effect on the environment or on human health?
No, they did not, but our engineer did state to us that his focus was on public health, human health, and not the environment, in compliance with our rules and regulations.
And where in this report can I find an analysis of the effect on the environment?
It's in his report, it's not there, because he was looking at our existing rules and regulations, which was asked of the planning commission to us, and then therefore we asked our engineer.
But where is it elsewhere in this inch and a half of documents I have?
As far as the effect to the environment,
Yes.
it's not specifically addressed in that document, but there's still at the process and the method and type of use is there. shows and documents that there are still emissions and the potential and the ability to have a significant effect. Yes, they do not specifically state it, but if you analyze it and look at it, there is still the potential.
Okay,
So-
and your view is that no matter how remote it is, that ability would come to pass, that's all you need?
For a 035 determination, yes.
Okay, I got it.
So on the emissions, page 8, you talk about the California listed particulate emissions from diesel-fueled engines as a TAC in 1998. Why'd you go so far back whenever all the emissions on the diesel vehicles got upgraded in 2012 and are still continuing through upgrades? I mean, 1998 is pretty old compared to what everyone's had to do to their equipment to bring it to current standards.
That's when it was declared a toxic air contaminant. And then the state set forth things to help reduce that with diesel trucks.
Okay, but we're not looking at the current, how much better.
There's still tax in diesel exhaust. That fact did not change.
There's different methods of mitigating.
Right, that's particulate filters and newer vehicles emit less, but
But it's completely different now than it was in 1998.
no, they're still
The law.
considered a tax.
The way of regulating it has changed, but the fuel itself is still contains toxic air contaminants.
Okay, and then the other thing that I was going to ask, coming back off of what they were saying, is on page 11.
Of the staff report?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa.
So when we're looking at the hazards and the approaches and the things that you're talking about with whether we're dealing with a double wall or we're dealing with how a toxic spill would be handled, anything like that, basically you're looking at it in its raw situation right now because it's not constructed to what it will be when they go into operation. And with all of the different agencies they have to comply with the state, and you talk about the EPCRA, the HMBP, and they say by complying with the California Hazardous Material Business Plan program, they would be compliant at that point.
Correct, with that program.
Okay, and that is a program they would have to participate in, mandated by the state.
Yep, correct.
So we're basing our analysis on it not being constructed and built, and we're looking at it in its raw instead of looking at it what it would look like once they've complied with all of the state agencies.
No, we looked at it with compliance with that, so we did look at it with compliance with the Hazardous Material Business Plan program, even though the submittal changed from one submittal to the next, but yes, we looked at it that they are in compliance with it.
Okay, and
Our
when you're, if you're coming up to today's standards and codes with the state, and you're looking at these diesel tanks, because I don't think a 5,800 gallon tank is that big personally when you're dealing with this type of business. And we've got tanks all over this county that are of large quantity and size, but many of them, and even in today's standards, wouldn't they have to, into state compliance, come up to building with a containment unit for that diesel, for above ground?
The containment can be general containment, and it can be, and therefore it doesn't have to be integral secondary containment. It can be, they could use, and what that means is they could use, if a spill from the tank was contained to that area where the asphalt plant was, that would meet secondary containment. Underground storage tanks are required to have integral secondary containment. Above ground storage tanks have different construction standards related to the fire code, and the spill prevention plan does not require integral secondary containment. So in the plan, an engineer could say, we're going to use all the soil up there to make sure that as a secondary containment. If a 5,800 gallon release, they can say that would be the secondary containment. In my mind, as a health professional, that would still have a significant effect on the environment.
So even if they had a secondary containment unit for an above ground unit, because I've seen some of them in the county where there's above ground tanks and they have the secondary containment units and they're complete concrete walled in, they're not going anywhere if there's a spill. At that point in time, would you still consider this to be the same scenario?
And it's not just the tank, it's the piping and everything with the system and the process. We didn't just focus on it. The tank is being plumbed to a generator tank. The tank is being plumbed to the heating oil tank. We've seen spills occur from the normal size tank that goes to the day tank because the mechanical overflow does not stop it. We don't, and so there is still that possibility.
Because I went out because I was looking at what you said there, and I also looked at their draft report, because you had indicated you didn't know if they were doing above ground, underground, and in their draft report, it specifically stated an above ground tank. So it was in the information that I got in my packet. I don't know why you didn't see that on the draft report.
No, we
but-
got it was above ground. I just used underground as just an analogy, so.
Oh, I thought you specifically stated you didn't know if it was above or under.
No, we know it's above ground.
Okay.
We know it's an above ground. At first, it was a 27,000 gallon tank, and then it went to an 12,000, and now it's a 5,800 gallon. And when we're out there, the tank seems, in my professional opinion, a lot bigger than 5,800 gallons.
Okay.
So
Okay,
that's my,
and that's
that's
from
my
being on
opinion.
site. Okay,
That's from being on site. That's my
That's
opinion.
good, okay. So then I had one other thing. I guess we're asking a whole lot of questions that don't even have any relevance at this point in my mind, because no matter what they do to mitigate or resolute anything that we're talking about here, as far as we do double wall piping, whatever we could do, it's still, as your opinion, that because they have these hazardous materials on site, they can't do anything to mitigate the fact that there could be an accident. And so,
In normal operations, and that's what to me is going for. The regulations that have it does not have that in place, and therefore that's the recommendation to go to make sure we get those mitigation factors put in.
I look at it based on, when you're asking them to do the CUP, you're looking at 1 year to 2 years potentially of delay for them to be able to operate that business. And during that entire process, and you're going to go through this, most of anything, probably everything, that comes out of that is going to be no different than what the state is going to tell them they have to do anyway. So it seems like we're making them do a 1 to 2 year delay on being able to operate, because anything that comes out of the CUP, they're going to be complying with regarding in state agencies that they have to comply with anyway, right?
Not necessarily. So, and as far as, the applicant did not demonstrate to us on how they mitigate. If we looked at a business complying with rules and regulations, then, then there would be no spills, and, we would not have to be inspect as a regulatory agency. My point is that there are things that could be, and I haven't been through a conditional use permit in this process, so this is a first for me too, and I apologize for my ignorance with
Oh, you
that.
don't have to apologize.
But there are things that may not, that are not covered by state law, then to further analyze to mitigate,
I can't even imagine, after all the agencies they have to comply with, we could find something the state hasn't already found.
So I have
Yeah.
I would like to, if this is a good time, even though there could be, all right, Ted has a question, but then after that, I want to check with the commission is that, the appellant's been here all morning, the public's been here all morning, and then maybe we could hold some of our questions, ask the appellant to make the presentation, and ask the public to come up out of respect for them being so patient.
I would agree with that, absolutely.
Okay, all right, so after your question, Ted?
Well, mine wasn't so much a question as it was a comment. After an awful lot of years in the engineering and construction business in my life, I've learned one thing, that when you're riding the fence and you jump off, the only way to go is down. It's pretty hard to jump up. And when you get to the bottom, sometimes it hurts. And I'm getting into one of those situations where from day one, those of you who were here, when this first came up, my feeling was that it should never have been put forward with anything other than a conditional use permit. The reason for that being the fact that, by looking at the audience, it's controversial. And whenever something is that controversial, it should be a conditional use permit and come to before the public, and not something that's kind of just shoveled underneath the table with one person's okay. I don't think that's a good way to do it. And so you can see which side I'm on as far as the outcome. but the way we get there makes a difference too. And I think there's an overall bias against this project. And maybe it's not all from here, maybe it's the way the laws are written. But you look at the thing that says like, something may cause, or it can cause, or it might be responsible for something. Something that may cause an event to happen, to me, is more likely than can. So if all of these things would have said, if everything goes the way that they would like it, and or the way the county would like it, everything says may cause, and that seems like it's a more likely thing, and that gives the overall thing I think a bias with the people who don't really go to all the meetings and hear all the talk. They say, oh, this may cause a change in the environment, or particularly a dangerous change. And that's really not the way it should be. It should be, yeah, it can do that, and that's the way it should be evaluated. But we're evaluating everything based on the fact that it may, which is higher on the likelihood side of the scale. So that's my problem with the overall thing. I think there's an overall bias in the way it's written.
Thank you, Ted. So I'd like to invite the appellant up, and if you could, maybe, I mean, I will give you some time allowance, but, maybe 15 minutes, and we'll see where you're at.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for waiting.
You're welcome. Appreciate it. Get organized. I want to be ready in case some other questions come up here.
And please sign in.
Excuse me?
Sign in.
Oh,
And this would just be a reminder for everyone to please sign in and state your name.
No, the other one.
somebody left a mark.
Think I need that?
Oh, yes, would you please? Thank you. Do you want me to, should I tell you when to forward it, or do you want me to do it? Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you. Right. Chair and fellow commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm Diane Kinderman with the law firm of Abbott and Kinderman, based out of Sacramento, California, and I represent CB Asphalt and Ford Construction in this matter. And before I get into details, and I know you want me to try to keep this short, and I will do my best. I know there are some supporters here who may not be able to stay because the day is so late, and would it be possible for them just to stand up and show their support in the event that they have to leave and aren't able to speak? Sure. May I ask them to do that? Thank you. Sure. Thank you, John. All right, so the first item I'd like to start with is, why isn't York here, and how did I find York? You know, who is York and why did I select them? I think it's important to know that. York is not here because we never imagined that staff would attack their findings. We felt that they were so clear. York has so much experience. Jason does as well, but I know what I'm really good at, and I know what I'm not as strong at, and I know where all my strengths and weaknesses are, I hope, at this point. But York has an extraordinary amount of expertise in this area, and they had substantial evidence to support all their findings. And so we were frankly stunned by the staff report. We didn't expect that at all. And I know in this scenario, we've tried to be in a collegial relationship with staff, meet with them. When we submitted information, I asked, do you have any questions? You know, is there something we've missed? I realize they're busy. You're dealing with a horrible tragedy with the fires. But, you know, a quick email, you know, this looks rotten. We aren't, you know, we're not in the same place. A heads up or something. I could have had York here, but York, the people we worked with at York are located in Southern California, San Juan Capistrano. By the time when I got the staff report at 1:09 p.m. yesterday, they couldn't get on a plane to get here. So I never imagined we'd be in this position because I thought it was so strong and that we would not need them. So we'll do our best. They did review the comments, did what they could and provided some comments to me, and so I've woven those into my discussion. I selected York because I don't just represent private individuals and businesses, I also represent public agencies. And in my work with some different counties on different industrial matters, I wanted to retain an expert. I know tons of air quality experts, tons of them. But I didn't want to use someone, say that I've used someone I've worked with before, we've, recommended, matters back and forth to each other. So I went to a couple of counties that I worked with. I said, who would you recommend? And the name York was really strong, and they were available to assist us. And so I had no idea what we were going to get in these findings. I'd never had direct contact with them, and that's why I selected them. So looked at their resumes, recommendations from some of our county clients, and I'd never had any direct contact with any of them. So that's why I selected them. So the first thing I would like to do, got a lot of pens up here, is just to respond to a couple of items, and I'll go through my PowerPoint. And I believe the Commission's raised a lot of issues already in my PowerPoint, so some of it I can go through pretty quickly. The Commission has identified that the standard that's been identified here, sort of the potential accident standard, that if there's any chance of an impact to the environment, that 0 has to be our regulatory standard, that any impact would have to be reduced to a level of 0. If it isn't 0, we must do a conditional use permit. If it's not 0, it equals a significant impact. And so that is what I understand to be the standard that we're operating from today. And I concur with the Planning Commission that noticed that as well. Just another one here, another comment. Since our operation began for Ford at the Hogan Quarry in 1990, there's been no spill at the site. Something very important about the site, the comment about the auto body paint shop at an industrial site. One of the commissioners had stated because it uses some hazardous materials, it's going to require CUP. And then Jason said, no, because it's contained, and therefore that wouldn't require CUP. Well, in the record, in one of our myriad hearings on this matter, we had PowerPoint, and it's in the record, how that this quarry, it's solid rock with a layer of clay, it's impermeable. And the way the stormwater system is designed is everything would end up in the center of the quarry. It would have to go over a berm into, to get into the river or outside the quarry. So if anything spilled, it's going right down into the center. And it's impermeable, period. And that's already in the record. So just like the auto body paint shop, this is contained, period. It can't get off site. So I think that was important to bring up. Let's see. Oh, another comment about why we have to do the conditional use permit. These materials are not normal operations for here in the county. Well, yes, there is no asphalt plant here in the county, that is correct, but the materials are common. Maybe not the liquid asphalt, but diesel is certainly common in the county, and they are totally appropriate, authorized, and standard for a hot plant, both in the amount of use and the way that they would be stored and managed. So they are normal and standard materials for a hot plant and appropriately used. Oh, on the truck traffic. Some of there actually might be less truck traffic in and out of the county because you will not have to have someone coming in to obtain the materials from the quarry and then take it off off-site, out of the county, to then mix it with asphalt. It will all be done on site, so that actually will result in a long-term reduction in trips in and out of the county. And then, once again, we've talked about this ad nauseum. Federal, state, and local regulations are designed to minimize the impacts to all of these to a level of insignificance. And they're required to by federal and state law, and of course, according to some local law as well. The comment that Jason consulted with other professionals, we don't have any of that in the record. We don't know who was consulted, what they said, what the basis was for their decisions. There's no evidence in the record to support that, so we cannot respond to those comments because we don't know what they were. There was a comment about, Jason's been out to the site a couple of times, and there was a comment about they just saw there was single wall piping. Well, we're not under construction because we don't have a permit yet. We don't have an authority to construct, so we haven't completed any construction, and things would be double walled and appropriately designed to ensure that in the event of an accident, it would be addressed appropriately under federal, state, and local law. We aren't under construction yet. It's not yet installed. And then I just appreciate Commissioner Allard's comment about an overall bias against the project. We sense that as well. That's neither here nor there from a legal standpoint, and we don't understand why, but it's unfortunate, but we're going to move forward here with our other remaining comments. So, any questions about what I just said quickly? Yes.
How much aggregate is sold now that becomes the blacktop component by somebody else outside the county?
Do you know that, John? I don't know the answer to that. Jerry, why don't you come up to the podium? Watch out.
When you crush rock, you know what's being used for, right? Because they
Yes,
give you a
because we have to
spec.
make it to a
Excuse me.
certain spec.
Could
My
you-
name's Jerry Middleton, I'm with Ford Construction.
Thank you. Don't forget to sign in, Jerry.
Yeah, we have to make products by spec to certain specs for everybody's needs. Currently, we do not have any asphalt demands for aggregate out of Hogan Quarry.
Okay. But that could happen.
It could, yes, and it has in the past.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, so with that, we'll go into this PowerPoint. We can go through a lot of it quickly. I will do my best. So on the first page here, we know this, it's just worth revisiting. The county's determined that an asphalt plant is an allowed use in the MR zone. It doesn't say it's an allowed use unless it's controversial. I think that is an interesting comment. It says it's an allowed use, and I just think we need to remember that. The controversy should have come up at the time that the zoning ordinance was changed. That is passed. Not now to argue that the zoning ordinance allows this use in an industrial zone. That time to argue about the controversy is passed. This is an allowed use in the zone unless, of course, we find that there is a significant impact. And we don't think that's been established here, and we'll go into that in a moment. So the next thing is that the county's determined that the asphalt plant may require a CUP if there are hazardous substances that will have a significant effect on the environment. Not may, but it will have a significant effect on the environment. The county's own outside expert concluded the plant will not have a significant effect. Ray Kapahi, he's great, he knows what he's doing. The county requested additional information from the ATC applicant, and I'm going to pull up exactly what they requested from us. We had a meeting, we all sat there and heard the same thing. Perhaps we all heard it the wrong way, but that's what we heard. And then the applicant has provided all requested information. And in fact, York responded to me yesterday with several comments, and they said, you know, we did provide the information requested in that letter. We don't interpret it as requiring anything else. If they wanted it, we would have been more than happy to have provided it. For example, Ray Kapahi's letter was dated November 15th. We never saw that until yesterday at 1 o'clock. We didn't know that they would have wanted this additional analysis. So,
Excuse me, stop there. The Kapahi report dated,
okay, there's a Kapahi report from May that talks about the plant. Then Ray submitted a separate report to them, a brief one, looking at the York report, in which he agreed with their findings, but said, yeah, you should have analyzed, you know, these mobile emissions. Well, nobody asked us to do that. At least we didn't interpret that all of us who heard this and the experts who looked at the letter didn't interpret that as being requested. I'm not the air quality expert. I know enough as a lawyer. I've dealt with it, but they looked at it and said, this is what they're asking for. I sat in the meeting and heard what I understood they were asking for. And so the second thing that came in from Ray, where he agreed with York's report, was November 15th. That was never handed to us. But, so we didn't know any more information from Ray was being requested
Please continue.
until the day before Thanksgiving, when some additional information was requested, and then we got it to them by November 30th. And that's when York submitted the second 5-page report. So, okay. So the other thing, on the requested information on the various, if we could go to the next slide, it might show here. So this is what was requested. This is right out of the September 8th letter. Now, everybody's referring to an August 24th letter. I requested a revision to that letter on the second page, and I'll get to that in a minute. Anyway, this is what was requested as to air quality. This is the language right out of the August 24th letter and the September 8th letter. And this is what we gave, York had the whole letter, but this is what their scope of work was for us, okay? So if you go to the next page, thanks, Jason. It's really hard to read, but they wanted these reports, but these are all the things for Coupa to review later on, not now. They all say draft after them. In the meeting, we agreed they would be draft because I knew it wouldn't be fair to have the client hire an engineer to prepare $20,000 reports when we don't even know where this is headed. They may be in another county. Who knows, okay? So, you know, we didn't, so if there is an inconsistency, that is my law firm's fault. We worked with CB Asphalt staff. We tried to fill it out properly. We submitted it. Jason noted there was an inconsistency. We went back. But these are all draft. They weren't intended to be final, fully designed reports. And that's why I requested the correction from the August 24th letter, because the August 24th letter didn't have the word draft in there, and we had agreed to that at the meeting, because I knew it wasn't appropriate to spend that kind of money on all these reports yet. So we wanted to give enough information to know whether or not there would be a significant impact. So I apologize. I take full responsibility for anything that appeared like an inconsistency. We're not trying to obfuscate any facts. In fact, I've got them right here, which is what was most recently provided to you on November 30th. The no waste oil will be stored on site. This is all mentioned at page 10 of the staff report. So no waste oil will be stored on site. The hazardous materials listed in August included a diesel tank of 27,000 gallons. There is not a diesel tank of 27,000 gallons. There's a diesel tank of 12,000 gallons and the hot asphalt plant tank of 18,033 gallons. And that's in the latest, when Jason said, hey, Diane, you got an inconsistency, we responded on November 30th and said, oh my gosh, we better go back and ask the client again. So we're not trying to obfuscate any facts, be inconsistent. I take full responsibility if that wasn't right. So we're not trying to do anything. Okay, so move on, if we may, Jason, when you have a moment, to the next slide, please.
Excuse me, but are you,
Yes.
you're saying that
And
at
I'm
the
sorry, I'm
time,
talking quickly to get through this.
at the time the staff report would have been written, there was no inconsistency?
Correct. That we clarified it on November 30th. I had my associate, I said, Dan, I should approve this, send it to the client, let's get it right, we made a mistake. And so we sent it again, revised in draft form, but we used the state template. We decided we should just use their form. In reality, and I know Commissioner Allred knows this, they're a very detailed, like 50-page document, a fancy cover page. We used a form that contained all the important information that would enable them to understand, the amount and type of materials used, or the criteria that they're looking for.
I should clarify my previous question. At what point was the inconsistency that it did exist cleared up?
On November 30th. We attempted to do that. All right, and so you could go on to the next page. This is just a continuation of what was in that September 8th letter, which mirrors the 24. Okay, so I just want to go over what we see as the four main issues with the staff report, and a lot of these were raised by the Planning Commission. Okay, staff, which was lacking in expertise such that they retained an outside expert, has now apparently become an expert such that it can challenge findings of both its own expert, Kapahi, and our expert, York. So, yes, Jason is an expert on many things, just like I'm an expert on many things, and I'm not on a lot of other things. So we were told to hire someone. We picked someone with the greatest level of expertise we could find, and that was York. And if it was all just going to be attacked for no reason, I don't know why we just didn't have Ray Kapahi do it. I mean, it would have been easier, and it would have been their own expert. But I don't understand how they could have taken this and just piece by piece challenged it with no supporting evidence, by the way, and I'll get to that in a minute. Number two, the attack on York, unfortunately, lacks any technical supporting evidence refuting its findings. And what that does is, under the legal standard, the lack of substantial evidence to support a finding makes it arbitrary and capricious. That's the legal standard, and an abuse of discretion. So I know Jason worked hard on this, but there's no evidence to support this. And you've already talked about that, so I'm not going to reiterate it any further. Okay, next one. Staff has identified new tests the applicant must comply with, which were lacking in any technical basis or thresholds. Once again, the goal line keeps moving. Some examples. The accident factor. Everything's based on how many accidents there might be. Number one, analyze all of the impacts of a plant that's not working properly. Okay, that's a new test. Address everything to Dr. Kileta, I don't know how to pronounce his name, satisfaction. He isn't satisfied. We have to satisfy him. We don't know how to do that. That's another test. Anything that is a Prop 65 substance will require an 035 analysis. And these new tests are throughout this staff report, so that's troubling as well. And ultimately, this was noted by a planning commissioner as well, staff's approach would rewrite the ordinance that says asphalt plants are an allowed use in the M2 zone because they would end up all needing CUPs. Because there's a theoretical possibility of an impact. That, unfortunately, is not evidence that a significant impact would occur. And we have not been able to find any evidence in here to support those findings. All right, so the next topic is the potential air quality impact. So there are two categories of comments: air quality impacts, hazardous materials. And if you could go to the next one. Thanks, Jason. Okay, so the three topics under potential air quality impacts: 1, toxic air contaminants; 2, odors; 3, long-term emissions. This is how we try to categorize their comments in the staff report. So, under toxic, next one, Jason, please. So, under the toxic air contaminants, the Kapahi report from May 2015 finds that risks of TAC, I'll call it TAC emissions from the plant, would not be significant. It's in his May 2015 report, so Ray knew there would be no impact. York analyzes asphalt transport and toxic air contaminants and finds no significant impact.
Ms. Kinderman, just to give you, you're at 20 minutes now, so
Okay.
if you could. I know
Well-
there were some questions in there, too.
Well, may I say something there?
Sure, come on up to the podium.
Sean Simmons with CB Asphalt, and I'll sign in.
Thank you very much.
We had 3 hours for staff to go through theirs, Your Honor, so I'd like a little time with her.
I didn't tell her to leave now, did I?
Yeah, well, I'm just making sure.
Oh, great. Your comment is well noted.
Thank you very much.
Do you want to take a break and have comments before I continue?
No, I don't think so. I think we're going to keep going. If you could go through your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Sean. All right, where was I? Okay, so on toxic air contaminants, so Kapahi found the risks of the TAC emissions from the plant would not be significant. That's in the May 2015 report from Ray Kapahi. York found that the transport of the hot mix asphalt will not create a potentially significant effect from TACs. And the Kapahi November 15th report responds by requesting some additional data, but ultimately agrees that York's conclusions are correct. So if we can go to the next slide, this is what Ray Kapahi said. It's hard to read, but It is our opinion that inclusion of hazardous emission rates would not likely change the conclusions presented in the York Technical Report. Nevertheless, the additional information should have been included given the broad definition of hazardous material under county regs. Well, we did not include that and didn't know we were supposed to. Ray has a good comment there, but he says, nonetheless, it doesn't change the conclusions. All right, next. Staff now kind of sets another standard that you have to eliminate the potential for significant health impact if the plant is not working properly, and that's at page 6. So that's a new test, and I talked about that a moment ago. So if the plant isn't working properly, we have to analyze all the impacts as a result of that. So, the consequence of that is, the county transforms any effect, no matter how remote or limited in scope, to a potentially significant one. And to survive the 035 analysis, one must be prepared to eliminate, zero, any risk, the risk of any and all theoretically possible scenarios that staff can come up with. So that, once again, are the tests. It's the moving tests. So next, toxic air contaminants, slide 11. Staff also asserts, even though directly contradicted by evidence from York, that fugitive emissions such as benzene come off the hot mix asphalt during transport. That's at page 6 of the staff report. York specifically confirmed that the only potentially meaningful release of emissions from the asphalt during transport was hydrogen sulfide, but that the amount, possibly zero, was too insignificant to have a potentially significant effect on the environment. So that's in the York report, the first one from November 4th. All right, next topic, odors. Next slide, thank you. Staff states the risk of odors was not analyzed by either Kapahi or York. It's in the May 18th Kapahi report, and it's also in York's November 3rd report. We can go on to the next slide. It's underlined. We underlined the Kapahi report where he says there's a potential for odor from these processes. So Ray looked at it and said, these results indicate the project impacts to public health would not be significant. So it was analyzed. And then the next page, next slide, is the York report. Based on the infrequent exposure to the transport trucks, et cetera, the brief duration of the exposure to asphalt fumes, and the expected dilution of the fumes due to the speed of the trucks and distance from the roadways to receptor locations, the impact of odors during transport of asphalt to and from the facility are expected to be less than significant. So yes, they were analyzed. On the, let's see, Kapahi, I was going to say, the Air District has the authority to ensure compliance with Rule 205. We talked about that. Substantial evidence in the record supports the conclusion that compliance is likely. Claims that there will not be compliance is pure speculation. The health officer cannot make a finding of a potential impact without evidence to support the conclusion. All right, so the next topic were the long-term emissions. That's the next one. Okay. Staff asserts, so despite staff's agreement in August that only the new truck trips need to be evaluated, the staff report now contends that the truck deliveries of the asphalt must be separately analyzed. And in reality, there is no increase in truck trips per York. To evaluate emissions from outgoing asphalt trucks would be double counting emissions. So there already are trucks leaving the plant. We've talked about that. Those truck trips are vested. They're already allowed, and we cannot double count those emissions. Let's see. There was also a comment on long-term emissions about airborne pollutants before I go on to the hazardous materials. In the report, it says the deposition of exhaust emissions into a stream. Once again, this is a new test that we have to be sure that there's a possibility of an impact because there will be diesel emissions floating and sprinkling all over the drinking water source. And once again, a theoretical possibility of an impact is not evidence that a significant impact would or could occur. Moreover, Water treatment plants use carbon absorption to remove organic compounds, and diesel emissions are organic. And moreover, diesel emissions are not considered toxic for any pathway except inhalation. So the entire question of deposition into a waterway is a non-issue. Sorry, I'm reading some of this, but I didn't have a lot of time to prepare last night, so. Okay, and then finally, the hazardous material use. Staff misstates our position in regard to hazards from asphalt oil. We have not argued it's not a regulated substance. Rather, the reason it's considered hazardous is for reasons related to fumes and high temperature, not its inherent risk to the environment, because it's inert once solidified, and we talked about that as well. The risks from fumes and related air quality emissions were analyzed by Kapahi and York and found not to be significant during plant operations or transport. Okay, what's next? I think most of these other issues have been covered about the unsupported assertions that an accidental release of asphalt could have a potentially significant effect. You know, their concerns over groundwater contamination are unsupported. We've talked about the fact of how the quarry is designed, impermeable rock. Everything would go to the center of the quarry floor, and none of it would end up in groundwater. Yes,
Nick Jones, Ford Construction.
go ahead.
She brings up the fact that everything will flow into the quarry floor. That is our tertiary containment. We have primary and secondary containment of all of those products existing, including the existing products under Foothill Materials. Just had to correct that.
Thank you. So also, the York report evaluated the risk of accident for truck deliveries and found it, this was raised as well, to be so remote as to be considered insignificant once every 117 years. And then staff asserted at page 13 that we had not considered undefined long-term effects from day-to-day operations. Staff did not articulate what this concern was, yet asserts that we failed to address it. And so there is an ongoing theme here that we haven't addressed specific things, but they have not been requested of us, number one. And number two, there's no substantial evidence to support the finding of either the need for it or the conclusion that there is a significant impact as a result of it. So that's my quick summary of my comments. Are there any questions at this time?
Any questions? I guess not, but
Yes, no,
I guess there are.
just flipping pages here. And maybe this is a question for you. Truck traffic. We've heard that the measure of that we're interested in is the maximum output of the plant and how many trucks that would produce, et cetera. So forget about asphalt plant right now. Is the quarry operating at max production?
No.
Has the quarry ever operated at max production?
Last I remember was flood of 97.
Okay, because rock was needed for fill and whatnot. Okay, if the quarry operated at max production, how many additional truck trips, round trip, would there be to and from that plant, to the site?
On a current day, Jerry? We need a calculator.
Well, at what percentage of production are you operating now?
We're probably at 40%.
Okay, so it would be more than double what you're operating at now,
Yes.
permitted by right.
Correct, but that's across the whole year. Certain
I
days
understand.
of any day of the week where we could be at a max production for that one particular day. We're consistently inconsistent. How's that?
You're up and down.
You got it.
But if you were measured against your maximum potential, the truck trips would be more than double?
Could be.
Thank you for the opportunity. Once again, there's no evidence to support a significant impact. There should not be a CUP required just because it's controversial. It is allowed use as a matter of right, and staff has failed to show any potentially significant impact.
I just want to make a statement on that, just so we can clarify. Just what
Yes.
you just said, Ms. Kinderman,
Yes.
suggests that the burden of proof would be on staff to prove that there is no significant impact. And I think you and I can agree.
No, to show that there is a
But
significant
I
impact.
think you and I can agree, I'm assuming, that the appellant would have the burden of proof to show that staff was incorrect at an appeal hearing.
I don't know. I have to think about that.
Okay, so that would be my advice to caution the planning commission is in general, an appellant would have the burden of proof of proving that there is no potential for a significant impact. And I would just ask in framing the record and framing your decision that you keep that legal burden of proof in mind.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you like to come up to the podium?
Can you put up the first slide again from CB's? Of course, Sonia. Brock Estes in Valley Springs. I'd like to start with some things that I think we can agree with before I become disagreeable. First up there, the county has determined that a concrete mixing and batch plant, ready mix is an allowed use in the MR zone. I'm sure we all agree that that's the correct wording there. You might want to ask them, is it a batch plant or is it something else? Number two, has determined asphalt plant substances that may have a significant effect on the environment. I don't think will is the correct word. Anyone disagree? Thank you. This is what Mrs. Kinderman does, is she uses words intend to prejudice you. She did it again with an incredible, I don't think they should be double counted. The number of trucks going out is the number of trucks going out. It either is or isn't injurious or potentially injurious to the environment. Now, something else we can agree on. An environmental impact report is like real estate. It depends on location, location, location. If you got a hot asphalt plant going out in the middle of the Mojave Desert, you have very little need for a very strong environmental impact report. If you have a hot asphalt plant going up 800 feet above the major water supply for a city of 400,000, who could sue us for every dime we had or ever would have if we fouled their drinking water, I would think the need for an environmental impact report is higher than for that in the Mojave Desert. I think you can all agree on that. Now, the question is, how high is it? Risk versus reward. We see a reward here from having that asphalt plant, but what's the risk? And what do we do? How do we balance out risk versus reward? And I say you don't take a chance in a sensitive place like where we are, because the Mojave Desert, different kind of thing. Now, there's a few things I'm going to have to say here, and some of them, the first one is going to make Lisa hate me, and it's off the subject. Lisa said, our children are standing in front of diesel buses daily and they're not dead. I was a union rep and a school bus driver in 2002 when the California Air Resources Board passed the most stringent controls on school buses ever, and it was my sad duty to tell everyone in the yard, follow these suckers or you'll be terminated and I won't be able to get your job back, because the fines were going to be so enormous if the companies didn't follow these rules. These rules mandate that you may not turn on your school bus and warm it up for more than 5 minutes before you leave the yard in the morning. In the afternoon, when you're picking up students, you may not turn on your bus until your bus is fully loaded and you're ready to leave. So if your children are standing in front of running school buses, breathing in that diesel, those drivers are breaking the law and they should lose their job, and you should complain about it. And the fact is, they did that because they'd done studies of children, and most more poor than richer, that ride school buses, and there were high incidences of emphysema and other breathing disorders. So they put in stringent rules. Another thing for Lisa, who said, I don't know what the state could regulate that they don't already regulate. That's why I'm using the word CEQA. I would like to see a CEQA investigation because CEQA is mandated to investigate displacement of people. And I'm telling you, that plant goes in, I'll be displaced, and a lot of people with kids who are going to be standing a few feet from asphalt trucks coming down the road are going to be displaced also. CEQA can make that decision. Are we being displaced on good grounds, or are we just fear-mongering ourselves? Now, there were a number of things said. Mr. Woolsey obviously read the report very thoroughly. He spoke to can't find it now. So I guess I'll have to say, I'm hoping that you're going to waive time for me and give me a little more time here. I haven't seen you do this, so I don't expect you to. If you decline to do so, then I'll officially right now challenge Commissioner Tuno to a debate on this. We'll have it at the MPAC clubhouse. We'll charge $5 a head, and all the money will go to Butte fire victims. I'm ready if you're ready. Well, there's a few other things, but I'm not. I'm just going to go right to the chase here. Some of you have drunk the Kool-Aid. The Kool-Aid you've heard 3 times here before today is there will only be 2 trucks more per day than are allowable now. That just isn't true. Nick Jones has testified before the Board of Supervisors that he will hopefully continue to service his aggregate customers if he makes this deal with CB and puts the asphalt in. So you are going to see the additional truck trips with the aggregate going out, and you're going to see 10,000 annual truck trips a year to make that 250,000 tons, 25 tons to a truck. Sean Simmons testified to that. We know they work in fits and starts much more in the summer than in the winter. So they have max days listed, 3,000 tons per day. That equivocates to 120 trucks per day. The York report says there will be 20 trucks per day. No, in the hot summer, when kids are out of school, out playing baseball in my block, there will be 120 trucks in a max week, every day of the week, 10 hours a day, 120, there will be a truck that rolls by their ball field or their house every 5 minutes for 10 hours all day. Now, from the York report, odors are not generally regarded as an annoyance rather than a health hazard. Manifestations of a person's reaction to odors can range from psychological, e.g. irrational anger, anxiety, to physiological, circulatory and respiratory effects, nausea and vomiting, and headaches. Now, those may be irritating. They may not be a health hazard, but on another page, the middle of page 8 lists the 6 variables in dealing with odor from asphalt transport trucks. Number 2 is frequency of odor generation. Number 4, distance of odor source to sensitive receptors. That's kids. Other people too, but kids too. And number 6, sensitivity of the receptor. That's kids. Nausea and vomiting, I assume that's written for adults. Imagine kids, asphalt truck rolls by, he's already said they're going to smell. The York report also says they're going to smell. We know it can't be that good for you to stand there breathing it constantly. How about every 5 minutes for 10 hours? York report says there will be 3 trucks an hour. I'm telling you, there will be 12 trucks an hour, 120 a day. And I'm telling you, based on their stats, 250,000, 3,000 in a max week. I mean, the fact that you're buying into the York report, remember, the York report was commissioned by Kinderman. Are you telling me that any of you don't believe that she told them there will only be 2 additional trucks a day over the base amount? And they wrote their report accordingly. They parroted it back to her on page 2 in her exact language, and they parroted her back at the end. They probably assumed that the people buying aggregate now were not going to buy their aggregate, that aggregate would be sold to CB instead. But we've heard Nick testify otherwise. CB wrote a report that's flawed because they were given flawed information to begin with.
Mr. Estes?
Yep, thank you. The debate certainly stands. I don't know if you want to accept now or sit there silently, but I'm throwing down the gauntlet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Janice Bassett from Valley Springs. I observed Lisa smoking today during lunchtime. Now,
What's the relevance here?
well, cigarettes don't kill you right away, do they? Or people wouldn't smoke at all. But if you're breathing asphalt fumes in, day out, it probably will have a cumulative effect on your health, more than likely. And I also want to mention that yesterday morning, there was gravel spilled down by the quarry. I know accidents never happen at the quarry, but it did happen yesterday morning. I also want to state that at 4:30 in the morning on November 19th, I was awake, because I get up every morning during the week at 4:30. There were lights a-blazing and loads a booming behind my house at 4:30 in the morning. I imagine that if this asphalt plant happens, I will have that every morning for weeks on end. You guys were very sympathetic to the gentleman that was here earlier with the cell phone tower, trying to figure out how to reduce the noise. What about reducing the fumes? What about reducing the effect of lights coming in my bedroom window? Now, some people say, well, we need this economic development for our county. It's going to bring jobs. Now, I really question that, because several months ago, I was here with my husband at a hearing, and we were standing outside near the Foothill Materials employees, and my husband asked Jerry Middleton, are there really going to be more jobs? And Jerry just kind of sheepishly smiled and shrugged his shoulders. He's a nice man. He told the truth. He said, not really. So, there's that idea gone. So, people that live near the asphalt plant like I do, I can see it from my deck. I can see it when I look out my bedroom window. We're fighting to protect the health and well-being of our friends, because I have family that lives nearby, and our neighbors, and our family, and our friends. We're fighting to protect our health and well-being. I don't know what you guys are fighting to protect. I really don't. I'd like to know.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm RJ Schultz from Valley Springs. I don't have any fancy notes or anything like that, but I figured I'd say a few words about this matter. I really think this whole thing's been blown out of proportion quite dramatically. I think it's a scare tactic used by EPA. People like himself here, Mr. Schultz? Baitzer. What was that? Baitzer. I think it's a scare tactic to try to block out business growth in the Valley Springs area. I do not think this plant is going to be anything like the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century or anything like that. Matter of fact, I had to actually look for the thing to actually see it, and I live within 2 miles of the plant. And so I'd really like to think about some facts. I hear a lot of opinions in this room, but I've yet to see some hard evidence this thing is going to be spewing black smoke and killing all of its residences in the next 30 years. So until we see those facts, I'd like to keep the opinions on the side.
Thank you.
My name's Bonnie Newman. I'm from Double Springs, and I listened to several hearings, and I decided I wanted to see with my own 2 eyes what that we were talking about. So I took a trip over to South Lake Tahoe to see the asphalt plant that exists there and has existed there for over 10 years. Because there's nothing, these folks don't have an asphalt plant that we can go and look at, so I went to the nearest one that was recommended that would be similar to what we were talking about. supposed to be in a very beautiful place, and it is, and it's not supposed to have any impact on the community. I took some pictures. I'll be happy to show you them. You'd like to pass them down. I'm not a photographer, so it looks psychedelic. But I was able to interview 3 people that lived right by the asphalt plant. The first person I encountered was because I was lost. I was driving around these giant piles of tailings or rock shards, and I couldn't find the asphalt plant. I could smell it, but I couldn't find it. So I stopped. A gentleman was loading wood, and I said, "Sir, do you know where the asphalt plant is?" He says, "Follow the smell." I said, "That smells all over." I said, "The reason I'm asking is because our county is considering perhaps putting asphalt plant sort of in a residential community." He says, "Well, move." And I said, "Well, I'm not in that community, but some of my friends are." He said, "Well, tell them to move." I said, "Well, I'm really here to get some ideas of how it has affected you." And he said, how it has affected him is the noise, the smell, the dirt, and the traffic. And that was the order he told me. And he gave me directions to get to the asphalt plant. And I got there, and they were not in production. They're only in production 3 months of the year, and they only work during the daytime hours. So I started taking a few pictures and walking around, and the smell was there. All the ground is black. They get their materials from when the casinos were built, I guess back in the 50s or 60s. They scraped all the land and dumped all the gravel on the side of a mountain, and it sat there for a number of years, and a community grew up around it, and at some point, somebody decided they'd make lemonade out of lemons and use this gravel to create an asphalt plant. So when I got to where the asphalt plant was, I drove down this little road. It's called Industry Way or Industrial Way, and on that road there is 2 storage units, a diesel engine rebuilding plant, and a couple of great big giant warehouses that don't even face that road. I stopped a lady who was, the road has been cut off, and they have put a cul-de-sac at the end of the road. And there's a lot of people walking on a walking trail, and so I tried to stop a lady who was walking a dog, and I said, "Ma'am, could I talk to you a moment?" "What do you want?" I said, "Oh, I just want to know if you have an opinion about the asphalt plant." "It's a dirty, stinking mess." And she just walked away and wouldn't talk to me anymore. So I said, "Well, okay." I stood around a little while longer, and pretty soon a man came by who was walking real slow with a cane, and I knew he'd talk to me longer because he couldn't walk very fast. And I asked this gentleman how long he'd been living there, and he told me 20 years. And I said, I explained why I was there and why I was talking to him, and he told me that when he first moved there, the asphalt plant really bothered him a lot, the smell and the traffic. But then the county or the city made them cut that road off so those trucks could no longer drive through their community. They're forced to take the back road to a 4-lane highway and take their trips that way, out of the neighborhood where they used to drive through.
Ms. Newman, your time's nearly up.
Oh, gosh.
Shorten the story.
Yeah, I'll do it real quick. His opinion to me was that it doesn't bother him so much anymore. He had a real bad car wreck, and he had a stroke, and he can't see, hear, or smell so good anymore. It was really sad. But he was a lovely man, and he talked to me for about an hour and a half, and he filled me in on all the history of how the residents in that neighborhood just could not take the traffic. And remember, they're only 3 months a year that they're in production, only during the daylight hours. But they were able to convince either the city or the county, that they could not put up with it anymore, and they had to reroute them on the back road.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We can get your photographs back to you, I'm sure, I think.
Oh, just one last thing. The status of the road that the trucks drive on, it's totally deteriorated. It's all in little blocks.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Lou Mayhew. I want to compliment the environmental health staff for an excellent report that I think easily meets the requirements of 035. I think perhaps it's been unfairly spot shot, or attempts have been made to parse it and pull it apart, because on balance, I think it brackets the complexity of the variables involved, the potential impact, and clearly makes the point that there are so many unknowns. Even the data from Ford is hard to pin down. There are so many unknowns that you need a CUP process to pin them down and give the county the ability to understand fully what's going on, have analysis done, and put in place, if needed, they may not be, but you really have to know honestly what's what, but put in place mitigations that protect the public interest. Somebody reading this on the face of it would say they are protecting the public interest, especially when you consider the volume of the plant, the dynamic production of the plant. It's not a static thing. And the water nearby, the drinking water source, 500 residents within 1 mile, a couple thousand within 2. It's an excellent report. I think you reject it at your peril because it does a good job. You can't quantify everything. You cannot expect that report to answer all of the questions that you try and spot shoot or narrow down and say, well, there are only 2 trucks, or the total emissions spread out over the county now compared to what would be is equivalent. You can't do that. You've got a focused community there that all of this is going to happen around and pass through. So it just seems to me that it has demonstrated that a CUP is necessary for the public good, health, and safety. It doesn't necessarily have to take 2 years at all, so I think a lot of scare tactics, if you will, have been thrown out or just put out there, perhaps honestly, perhaps with a misunderstanding. You don't know. But I think you have to trust the professionals. They did a good job. I think they went well beyond what they were asked to do. And I think, in essence, some of the questions that have been asked of them really would like to have done or like to, in essence, you're asking for the kind of analysis that a CUP process would provide for you. And to expect that to be done short of that, I think, is unfair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would you guys like to take a 5-minute? Yeah, so let's take a 5-minute break and we'll be back at 10 after. We're getting started. Woo, am I losing my voice? Woo!
It sounds good.
Thank you. All right, we're going to be continuing with the public hearing.
I'm in my seat.
And just as an announcement, we will be adjourning today at hopefully about 4:45, 5 o'clock at the latest. So we'll see where we're at when we get to that time.
The message is hanging.
Yeah. Oh, there's your pen there, Ted.
My name is Joyce Teckle, myvalleysprings.com. There are risks from flammable hazardous materials, and the Hogan Quarry is in a high fire hazard area. I just want to remind you of that. I'm going to read something from a little bit from Jason's report, staff report on page 12. Excuse me, I've been sick for a while. If my breath gives out, bear with me. Starting mid-sentence on that first paragraph. Spills and releases such as piping leaks, overfills, and spills of hazardous materials do regularly occur at facilities working with hazardous materials. The type, quantity, and method of use concerning the hazardous materials proposed for the asphalt plant do give rise to a potentially significant impact on the environment, and it would be disingenuous to assert that there is no potential for a significant accident release. Environmental statutes and regulations recognize that even assuming compliance with rules and regulations, releases of hazardous materials into the environment may occur due to human and mechanical failure. And may is the threshold in the rule Jason's been quoting. This is a picture of an accident that occurred at an asphalt plant in Skanska on September 15th, I believe, September 29th, 2015. And I'm sure this is a plant that has all the right equipment and followed all the rules. But stuff happens, as has been said at this meeting. The headline from the Desert Sun is Skanska Asphalt Plant Fire Under Investigation. Firefighters are trying to determine what sparked a fire at an asphalt plant north of Indio and sent black smoke into the Coachella Valley sky on Monday. The fire was reported at 9:45 in the morning. Much of Monday morning was spent containing the fire and preventing hazardous chemicals and fumes from spreading into the environment. The fire threatened a 10,000-gallon container of rubber emulsion, but firefighters managed to prevent it from catching fire. Later, a Palm Springs tanker truck, which is usually for putting out airplane fires, doused the scene with foam to prevent vapors from entering the air. Hydrogen sulfide gas may have been released into the air, and nearby residents are encouraged to stay indoors if they think they are susceptible. The local facility appeared to be mostly intact following the fire. It's in a hillside area separated from most developments, but dark fire from the smoke was visible across the desert. It could be seen at least as far as Palm Springs, but people in India and Coachella said the smoke was especially scary up close. Thermal resident Enrique Sanchez, 40, was at Spotlight 29 Casino in Coachella when the fire burned. He said black smoke darkened the area directly up below. It's covering everything, Sanchez said. It was bad. Everyone was watching. The fire was contained about 3 p.m. on Monday. Now, this happened in a desert, so that may be a little different than happening in a bowl with a bunch of people around it. And I'm sure these people were running this business up to standards. Stuff happens. That's a tanker truck that's on fire in there. I guess it was delivering something. It's a pretty big bunch of stuff in there, in that truck. Just thought I'd offer that for you. Oh, by the way, I remind you, it's already been testified on the asphalt plant that blew up in Clements. They had, that was some 20 years ago, they had pieces as big as cars coming out of the air. Just thought I'd share that.
Thank you.
My name's Sam Arledge. I was that poor kid riding the bus around here. Been around here, and I work for a local asphalt company. Make good money. Not much kids around here got anything to stay around and work. There ain't no work around here. That asphalt plant brings jobs to the county. That's all I gotta say.
Thank you.
I'm Morgan Simmons. I just wanted to get up here and say that I, too, am 21 years old. I've been doing this for 3 years now. I'm a screed man, and I pave the roads. I'm actually the guy who puts the asphalt down on the roads. I know not many of you guys who have spoken today have been around it and done it. So I just wanted to say that I'm for it. I do it every day. I got mentors who taught me, who've been doing it for 30 years now, every day of their life. And it is going to bring jobs back to the community, so I'm full support. And I just wanted to go in so we could start back work. Thank you, guys.
My name's Louise Garner. I live within 2 miles of an asphalt plant. I haven't had any problems with it at all. I don't smell anything. There's no problems with it. And it is located within 1,000 feet of McCollum River.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Judy Morgan, and I live on Silver Rapids Road. As in regards to traffic, there's been a lot of truck traffic on the road in the last, I don't know, I've really noticed it in the last month, and that's just hauling rock and whatever. So that kind of traffic is still going to be going out of here when they start selling asphalt. So it is going to add to the traffic. And it's not just, it's going to be these trucks in the county. All of these trucks are going to be going right down Silver Rapids Road, and it is going to make a difference. It is going to have quite an impact on us that live there. I think that decisions should be made on the side of safety and concern for the people that live there, along with your county code and laws. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me, sir, you've already been up, right? Weren't you just here?
Yeah. I'd like to say another thing, though, if I
Well,
could.
maybe you could come back. There might be someone else. Give them an opportunity.
Anybody else want to go?
Thank you.
Arthur Mears, Valley Springs. I'd like to get to know you, Jason, because I never heard anybody say they got attacked before by you for writing something that may be significant, okay? I understand that's probably legalese for some bad stuff could happen, okay? So I think he's trying to tell you in a nice way, this needs some looking at, okay? Either mitigation, putting down a solid concrete barrier so that when anything spills, it goes right into a catch basin. Nothing's lost, nothing's in the river. I don't know how you came up with 800 feet from the river. I don't know. I think it's a little less. The lady back there said 1,000, but you know, if it's rock on the bottom, it's permeable. It's going to soak in. It's going to get into the water, and eventually, not maybe in our lifetime. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Colleen Platt with My Valley Springs and the Calaveras Planning Coalition. I don't have any prepared notes. This is a big, overwhelming subject, and I want to thank Environmental Health and Environmental Management for doing such an excellent, thorough job of studying the subject. But as we can tell by the questions that keep coming up, that's not the end of this story. This still needs more examination. We need some mitigation measures to make sure these potential impacts don't happen. That's the whole point of going to a use permit and a review. That's what we need. This is in no particular order, I'm just addressing some things that came up. There was a quote, since 1990, there's been no spill at the site. I don't know what that means, because there's aggregate rock that's spilled all the time on the road out there. I mean, not all the time, I'm sorry, that's an exaggeration, but there is aggregate rock that spills regularly. That just happened yesterday morning. I happened to be there when it was spilled, and there was tractors in the road, on Silver Rapids Road, cleaning up the road. The bridge goes over the river. There's debris and dust that end up flowing off of that bridge into the river because it's not perfectly clean all the time with the amount of trucks going over that. So there are impacts that happen there as it is with the existing rock quarry, much less adding this new use to it. There is another quote that stormwater is contained, can't get off the site. Well, I've seen both the stormwater prevention plan and the waste discharge plan. There's two different ways of discharge on that site. The stormwater from the actual mining area is concentrated into a pond. The stormwater away from that area drains off-site, which includes the river. So that's not an exact correct quote that they said. And another point is that both of those stormwater prevention plan and waste discharge plans are based on the aggregate operation with no chemicals used or added to the aggregate. So in other words, any water that lands on that site that's from waste or from things, there's no toxic chemicals in there at this time because it's an aggregate plant. If you go adding asphalt plant and asphalt trucks, there's going to be a change. You're going to impact the wastewater and the stormwater on the site. They're going to have to get their plans all redone. That doesn't happen overnight. This is something that needs to be looked into. You do have groundwater there. You've got surface water, the river's there. You're going to have impacts. That has to be looked into and mitigated. That's the purpose of a conditional use permit, to look at the sensitive receptors in the area, to look at all these impacts on water. I could go on and on. I can't. There was another quote about, I think this was from the York report, the distance from the roadways to receptors being insignificant or not going to have an impact. That statement really baffled me because you should drive that road and see how close those homes are to the road. There's front yards right next to Silver Rapids Road. There's kids out in the front yards. You know, you're not talking, they say, I think 25 meters, which I worked out as 82 point something feet. There's going to be children a lot closer than 82 feet in those front yards to the trucks going by. And you keep having this unending discussion about how many trucks we're talking about because we haven't done the proper study. That's the whole point of doing these reports. We've heard anywhere from a low of 2 additional trucks a day to a high of 150 trucks a day, according to their maximum output a day, which is on the applicant's information. It's not something we're making up. This is in the applicant's information of 3,000 tons a day is what they can do. If they've got a contract from Caltrans and they need to finish it right now, that's what they're going to do. 3,000 tons a day. Divided it by 20 tons per truck, which is an industry standard, evidently. You've got 150 trucks a day is the potential there. That needs to be addressed. We can't just keep pretending it's 2 trucks a day. Another issue that I have not ever heard answered, and it's not even addressed in the current staff report because evidently there's been conflicting information again from the applicant. The inclusion of the material called recycled asphalt pavement, and they call it RAP for short. And it was in the project description originally as a possibility, and then later, and it was in another project description as 25%. We intend to use up to 25% RAP. This is in the applicant's own project description. Now, evidently, we're getting conflicting information, so environmental health didn't address that because now they're saying they're not going to use it. I would like an answer from CB Asphalt. Do they intend to use recycled asphalt pavement or not? And if so, are they planning to use up to 25%? That was supposedly the whole point of going to a drum mix facility versus a batch plant, is that it's more efficient, it produces less emissions, and you can use a higher amount of RAP up to 50%. That's what they said in their own documents. We would like some answers, because if they are using RAP, that's a recycled asphalt pavement, that's not produced on site. that has to be trucked in. So you're talking about a lot of additional trucks, 25% of 250,000. Do the math, it's 60,000 tons. Divide it by the trucks, that's another 3,000 trucks. We're not addressing these situations. This is the kind of things that makes residents very nervous. You wonder why they're worried. They should be worried when these aren't being answered, these questions aren't being answered. I have tons of letters and papers I've written. As you know, we've been involved in this for months. I think that's close to what I can deal with in the time that I have. Other than that sentence, truck trips are vested, so we can't count them. Makes no sense. You need a baseline, which is existing truck traffic. What is the existing truck traffic? Nobody has given that. They must know that. They have figures how much their sales are per year. We need those figures. What is existing truck traffic?
Don't be looking there, Colleen. I think your time's just about up.
Okay, thank you. I just want to, as you can see, I can go on. I think it's obvious, though, that this proposed operation does have the ability to impact our environment. I think that's pretty clear, and we need a conditional use permit to look at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Mr. Race, and I'm from Jenny Lynn. I'm the other side of the ridge from the quarry. One of the things that mentioned that compared to what San Joaquin County pollution, I just wonder if how much of this county's pollution credited to San Joaquin County, because any and most of our pollution coming from San Joaquin County. It's according to Mr. Moss. We are squeaky clean as this county goes. The other thing is diesel above the ground. That's because there's going to be spillage and all that. I got the impression it wasn't really any numbers on it. Well, there's a above ground tank right across Appleby, and beside that there's a couple above ground, substantially more diesel fuel in for CCWD, for instance, above ground. Has there been any problems along that line? I would love to know. So there's a couple more, there's a couple different places above ground, great amount of diesel fuel. I don't know what a school has their above ground tank, but they do have one someplace. Did anybody had any problem with it? I would be more afraid of an earthquake and results of an earthquake, California. I'm more afraid to drive across San Joaquin Bay Bridge, the rebuilt new bridge that's leaking and they're rebuilding it. I'm more afraid Mount Diablo's still a volcano, folks. Still a volcano. I'm more afraid of that. I like to see this county prosper. Yes, I do want it safe. I'm getting tired of people trying to scare everybody. We do live in a world, I think it's Yellowstone. You know you're going to get a volcano, just question how soon. So I support it. I did business with these folks. They don't know me because I'm just one of the guys who haul gravel out of there once in a while. Excellent public relation. They do care. They live here. And you know what? The bottom line is, if this operation goes ahead, the county will benefit substantially. I believe it was $1.8 million was mentioned. Am I close enough? Okay. It was mentioned, and I think that benefits this county. I get more kind of disturbed sometime in the morning when all the school buses go out. If you ever follow all the school buses when they leave, that's pollution, okay? That's diesel pollution. That's pretty heavy-duty, solid pollution, folks. So, for what it's worth, please support it. I support it. A number of other people support it. This county got to get out of the dark ages. about time to look for the benefit of the majority of the people in this county. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Judy Allen, and I live in Valley Springs, La Contenda specifically. Sign in here. And I'm also here to make a few comments about the environment. I've heard a lot about one of the potential ingredients, bitamine, I believe it was. I saw some comments that there were some side effects, and I wanted to research it a little bit. So I found that one of the potential side effects is benzene exposure in the atmosphere. So I wanted to learn a little more about benzene. I did a little more research, and I found, per the Department of Health and Human Services, the major sources of benzene exposure are tobacco smoke, active and passive, auto service stations, motor vehicle exhaust, and industrial emissions. And on a report from the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, it stated that while all of these sources release more benzene into the environment, a large percentage of the benzene inhaled by humans comes from cigarette smoke. Exhaled breath of smokers contains benzene. So I'm actually more concerned about pesticides in the environment, what they do to our waterways, and I'm actually in support of this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Bill McManus, Hanford Hill. I live up the top of District 3, so I don't really have a dog in this fight as far as whether there's an asphalt plant or not. I think it would be great for the county. The concern I do have, though, is concerned more with the process here today. Now, I could be wrong, and if someone will point out that I was wrong, I will gladly accept that fact. But I thought I heard a requirement placed on the appellate that it's up to them to prove a negative when it comes to the health department not being able to substantiate what is significant or less than significant. So I don't quite know how you do that. If that's going to become part of the procedure for other things in the county, I think I'd be a little bit reluctant to get into it because it's almost impossible. As an appellate, I don't know that they're required to prove anything other than the facts they present. I think placing a burden of telling the health department why their facts are inaccurate or why their statements are inaccurate is too far of a leap, and I don't think it's fair. So just on the basis that the asphalt plant is another business for the county, seems to sound okay to me, I'd be in favor of it, because when we start turning away businesses and jobs and get into that habit, if we're not at the end already, we'll soon be at the end in Calaveras County. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? All right, would the appellant like to make a presentation and maybe address some of the concerns, issues that were raised?
Thank you for the
You're welcome.
opportunity. Just one comment about using the recycled asphalt. It would be used, but we don't know the percentage because they haven't determined a mixed design. It's premature to know.
Is that correct?
All right. So anything I would say would be repetitive. I think we've said it all, really. A lot of effort went into the report, but there really is no substantial evidence to support any of it. We think we provided substantial evidence to support findings that there would not be a significant impact We understand what a CUP is about. The project is controversial, but the ordinance doesn't say that if it's controversial, you get to do a CUP. So we believe a CUP is not necessary here. Once again, there are so many federal, state, and other local rules that are imposed upon this that are required to mitigate impacts to the extent that's even possible. And this plant will be safe, it will operate properly, and we can't suppose it's going to be accident-prone. There just isn't any evidence to support that. So we appreciate your time listening to us, and we hope that you'll vote that a CUP is not necessary. And Sean would like to say something. Thank you.
Evidently, there was a question, excuse me, I had to step out for a few minutes, but about the recycled asphalt
Could you
product.
please state your name?
Sean Simmons.
Thank you.
And all the wrap, we call it, the recycled asphalt that comes back is a backhaul. So a truck comes in loaded with the wrap, drops it, gets under the silo and goes back out with a hot mix. It's cost effective that way. So any assertion by anyone that it's additional trucking is wrong. So if that helps.
May I ask a question
bet.
about wrap? Wrap contains the bitumen product. So if you use 25% of your total mix is wrap, does that reduce your use of the bitumen that you bought in liquid form to, I'm getting a shaking of the head over here, yes. So
Mr. Tuno, that's correct, yes.
It reduces that.
You betcha.
And the truck trips are net zero gain.
Correct, and I think that for conversation purposes, everybody's been using the 5% liquid asphalt. Technically, that will in fact be low. That's right now, based on the absorption on the aggregates and stuff, that's on the high side. We've tried to be honest with all the calculations, but it would go down, yes.
Thank you.
I've got a question before you
Yes, sir.
leave. This recycled asphalt that comes in is basically busted up old pavement, isn't it?
Correct, yes, sir.
Does it emit any gases or fumes or anything?
No, sir.
Because it's cold?
It is cold.
Thank you.
That wrap is a processed product. So when you see the existing
Excuse me,
road,
could you
Nick
please?
Jones, Ford
Thank you,
Construction.
Mr. Jones.
It goes through a profile or a grinder, picks up that material, and it spits into a truck. So it's already processed to a 3/4 inch minus type product.
Oh, it just goes straight into your batch mix
Yes.
from the.
So it comes out of the highway that's getting paved, gets ground down, thrown in a truck goes back, drops it off, picks up hot mix, goes back and fills in the hole that we just ground out.
Your crusher doesn't do anything to it.
Nope.
I got another question.
Yes, sir.
The issue was raised by Ms. Platt about where the water would go if you had a spill. It's not at the quarry, but at the plant site. And I thought she said that it would, the way the land lies, it has the potential to go into the river, or at least not into the hole that's at the site. So can you comment on that?
Yeah, so where his asphalt plant is going is up on top of the hill where it's got primary and secondary containment. And it sits on top of about 5 or 6 feet of clay, and then we have native hard rock underneath that. So if it was to breach a tank, secondary containment would catch it. If that should catastrophically fail, then any of that fuel would not seep into the ground because of the clays that are there. It would go down into our quarry floor. Everything's been graded to drain into the quarry floor.
And the quarry floor is rock?
Yes, solid rock.
Thank you.
If I just might, Claire, since there was a question about burden of proof, I think one of the things Ms. Kinderman and I were debating is, I don't know if we were debating, but one of the issues that came up is, when somebody appeals something or challenges something, who has the burden of demonstrating that the decision they're appealing is wrong? And it's just a normal, standard premise in law that I think Mr. Wooster, being a member of the bar, would also be familiar with, that the person who is challenging a finding always in court or before a hearing body would have the burden of proof. And so I think Ms. Kinderman stated it at the end correctly. If the appellant demonstrates by substantial evidence that that there isn't a potential for a significant effect on the environment to the point that satisfies the Planning Commission, I think that would be the standard. And I think the Planning Commission is free to look at all of the evidence fresh. This is what would be called de novo review on the part of the Planning Commission, to look at the credibility of the of the different witnesses and documents and come to its own decision about that, but it would be the appellant's burden to demonstrate that staff arrived incorrectly at its conclusion. And so it's not something made up or a brand-new procedure being imposed. That is how appeals generally work. And if a court reviewed this decision, well, it would be the Board of Supervisors. I think the court would also be looking at whether substantial evidence supported the decision made by the Planning Commission or the Board of Supervisors. So,
But in the normal course of things, when you're talking about normal court actions, there's first a suit, and the appeal comes from the results of the suit. So in the first suit, the plaintiff had the burden to prove by preponderance or clear and convincing or whatever his standard was, his case. The defendant doesn't have to prove anything. If the case goes against the defendant and the defendant appeals, then the burden of proof is on the defendant, now the plaintiff, in the appeal process.
right.
But what we don't have here is that first case. We don't have a case for them to appeal in the normal sense of the word. For example, if the health officer didn't come up with any report, didn't present any facts at all, just said, I think there's going to be a hazard pursuant to 035, a one-word answer, a one-sentence answer. Hypothetically, he would never do that, of course, but hypothetically, if he just said, no, I think 035 applies here. There's a significant effect possibility here, so CUP is required. If that's all he did, and that decision was then appealed, you're saying that the burden of proof would still be on the appellant to prove that the decision was wrong?
I think in general, a burden of proof works that way. I think what you have the benefit of, because this isn't a normal appeal process, is what's called de novo review, where you independently can look at all of the evidence and determine and weigh it separately. You don't have to rely or give deference to the planning directors or the environmental health officer's decision. I don't want to get too deep into hypotheticals since it's not the case right here, but I would just caution the Planning Commission from assuming in any finding it makes that it was the environmental health officer's burden to prove that there may be a significant effect. I would just think that it would be safer for the Planning Commission to simply make a decision based on the evidence that was presented without assuming that it was staff's burden. Usually the burden of proof lies on the appellant.
Okay. I guess I was looking ahead to a court environment, but that's probably a different...
I was going to caution you a little bit on that. We're not in court. This is a public hearing.
I thought the environment that was being referenced might be that environment, and I understand. If it came back to us, we're not worried about burdens of proof. We're just doing a fact finding. Correct?
You're doing fact finding, and I just, again, I would ask the Planning Commission to be mindful of imposing a burden that might not really exist in law when you're weighing the evidence.
Okay.
Did you have a question, Kelly?
Yes, I'd like to ask the applicant about the number of trucks a day, because there is this figure of 3,000 tons a day maximum output, and if you divide that by 20 or even say 25, you'll come up with quite a few trucks a day, 100 or 120.
Yes, sir.
Now, is that a number is that a real world number? Is that something that we should be looking at as something that could happen?
Well, and Nick can also comment to this. Basically, I think where everybody seems to get confused, from my understanding, right now, I think 300,000 tons of aggregate is the current permit out of the Hogan Quarry. They're not up to that capacity. What we're saying is basically, if they were running at max capacity of 300,000 tons of product leaving that quarry right now, if the hot plant goes in and we start selling hot mix, that 300,000 tons will not change. What will change is, instead of going out as raw aggregate, a certain percentage of that the more the better for us, if we're permitted, obviously, will be coated with asphalt as it goes out. So if they're running 300,000 tons, I believe that's roughly 12,000 loads per year. Of product. The quantity of product of aggregate, you'll have 5% more if we use the asphalt, the liquid asphalt number. That will be the increase. The trucks coming in with the liquid would be the increase. But they're only permitted for X amount of tons right now, through you folks, I believe, to leave the quarry. We're just saying that that'll transfer. If they were at max capacity, it'll be asphalt aggregate sold to us. It'll go out hot and black. So the number of trucks that's allowed out of that pit right now will hardly change at all. And everybody keeps, oh, they're lying, no, we're not, we can't. They can only allow so much aggregate to be processed. We want to use as much of that as we can in the asphalt, but the total trucks will not. The 3,000 tons per day is, we've been asked for maximum productions. Honestly, most cases, it's probably a 1,200 ton is your average production shift. 3,000, I'd love to have 3,000 ton days every day if we're operating. It just doesn't happen. This plant isn't large enough where we can idle and cruise and everything goes smooth. The work anymore isn't your big mainline deep paving. It's all thin lift overlays. It could do that. We could do that. But I think that should be looked at as a maximum. If that, does that help?
I think so. If my math is right, then if you did 1,200 tons a day, that's about 60 truckloads a day.
Yes, sir. And that's spread out typically over a 10-hour paving window.
Diane Kinderman, may I add something? And I also think from a standpoint of significant impacts, trying to determine if there are significant impacts, we have to be honest and provide the maximum capability of the plant. Does it mean that there's a market for that now? No. Does that mean in the future when they renew their air permits that they're going to be able to get that, capacity? No. But right now, with Ford is only operating at 4%. So does that mean in 5 years they're going to be at that max capacity? No. Well, he's at 40%, right? Okay, thank you. But there is a market, but not that much of a market. But we have to identify the worst case scenario for purposes of assisting in determining whether there might be a significant impact.
While you're there, and to clear up the truck thing, because Mr. Estes has brought it up, indicating that we're getting false information here. Do you dispute the truck number ranges that have been presented?
Well, it just changed because according to their application that they submitted to our department, we have normal operation productions and maximum design productions. The normal productions submitted by CB Asphalt show 300 ton per hour, 3,000 ton per day, and with a 50,000 ton per project. Maximum design production is 300 ton per hour, 3,000 ton per day, with a 50,000 ton per project. So we have new information now. This is what's been submitted to us in their application. And now that's changed on the numbers of what the average day amount. So we looked at normal operation production. In the application submitted to the Air District, it showed 300 ton per hour, 3,000 ton per day. That was the figure provided by CB Asphalt.
Okay, let's clear up the...
That's the maximums. Those are the maximums.
Well, it says, I'm just saying, in the
So
application
does it
it
say it
says
on
normal,
both?
and then it says maximum. So
That
I
is
didn't put
nice.
that there. That was put in by the applicant. So that's what, I'm telling you what was provided by the applicant.
I'm not sure what you're looking at. The maximum, it's a 300 ton an hour hot plant. And the 3,000 ton a day, those are the maximum numbers. I'm not sure what
Based on
Jason's
market
looking at.
demand, which doesn't exist yet.
The plant can only
It
run
may
so
never-
fast.
Okay.
So the trucks that you're currently running, hauling the rock out, the rock would no longer be hauled out, and you would be using those trucks for paving, correct?
I think I understand it correctly. If they were at maximum production, right now, if they're running a 40% capacity, that would increase, yes, up to their maximum allowable of 300,000 a year. If, in theory, they were at 300,000, the same amount of aggregate would go out, but depending on how much, what went out coated as asphalt would be 5% increase per ton of product.
You
If
can
that-
I'm-
skip the 5%.
Okay, I'm talking about today. Today, you're using the trucks to go in and out of there to haul rock out because you can't process the paving on site.
For all intents and purposes, the only increase would be the liquid asphalt coming in.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. So, yes, I'm going to ask members of the public to come back up, and if you'd like to, Mrs.
This is not a comment, this information. Once in a while I go to some of these meetings, and CCWD is installing, getting the grant and so on, because there's so much pollution going to be coming down on Calaveras River to New Hogan from the fire. So they're putting a super duper filter or whatever that's more than capable of any runoff or sediment that might get into Calaveras River. So CCWD, not for this particular issue, but because of the pollutant going to be washed down from the fires, Calaveras River and so on, for drinking water, they have to upgrade their scrubbing capacity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe Mr. Baser?
Yeah, just to comment on Peter's, they are upgrading. One of the issues that the plant has is manganese. With the fire burn, they're not looking at pollution from the debris from structures. It's naturally occurring manganese and minerals in which they're upgrading their plant to, from what I understand, and talking to Bill Purley, who was in my office this last week. So I just want to make sure that the plant is being upgraded on looking at minerals, manganese, iron removal, not toxic chemicals from the burn debris. So we don't, it's a public meeting to make sure that it's not
Okay.
noted.
Manganese is toxic.
Thank you.
What's that?
Manganese is toxic.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to hold you, you have 2 minutes. Sure.
I just wanted to tell you that
I'm sorry, could you state your name?
Oh, sure, Janice Bassett. I've been speaking with people that work with and haul asphalt, and what they tell me is not good. And in fact, there's one gentleman, of course, I can't use his name, and he will not speak out in public because he needs his job. But he did tell me that truck drivers are pushed to haul, and plus they make money according to how many trips they make. So they're motivated to make as many trips as possible, and their employer pushes them to make trips that maybe aren't beyond their ability to drive safely. And when they're hauling toxic materials and you have an exhausted driver going through residential areas, I think there's a potential for it just may have a significant impact on our environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Lou Mayhew. I think the discussion that you just had illustrates very well the need for a CUP process. The numbers that were thrown out, it's not clear to me that everybody follows each statement and the implications of that, but I think it's fair that environmental health uses the maximum potential number of tons and the implications of the number of trips to consider whether there's a potential environmental impact. Because with that, the maximum magnitude, which there's nothing to stop that occurring, I mean, that's what has to be used as a basis for deciding, do we need to look at this, perhaps come up with some mitigations, or at least the CPU process could allow you to get a fix on best estimates and some firm numbers. So it just seems to me you don't have enough solid information to in any way contradict the report produced by environmental health. Thank you.
Thank you.
Colleen Platt again. I just wanted to say, Lisa, you hit the nail on the head there, but I don't think your question was answered. From what I heard, you said trucks are hauling rock out today, and you wanted to know, and there won't be any more rock hauled out. And the answer was unclear. Basically, I think what Sean Simmons was saying is that, as Nick said, they're at 40% production now, and they could go up to 300,000, but they're not. They're at 40% production. So they're at a certain amount of truck traffic now with hauling aggregate. And some portion of that will convert itself to asphalt trucks is the proposal. There's also going to be some portion that won't convert to asphalt. They will continue to sell aggregate, right? Somebody comes, they're going to sell aggregate to them. So that amount of truck traffic is going to remain. That's just normal sales of aggregate. The only thing that's going to convert is what is being sold to somebody like CB Asphalt now, who can now be sold on site. So you're still going to have an increase in truck traffic hauling asphalt plants on top of the existing aggregate. They're not really answering what your question of how much rock would no longer be hauled out. Would all of the rock no longer be hauled out? Sure, there will still be rock hauled out. So that's, as Lou said, that's why we need the numbers. We need some clear final numbers, and we need studies to figure out exact impacts of traffic. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing, bring it back to the
Could I ask
commission.
another question of the asphalt people?
Sure.
Okay, this plant is not yet been constructed in the sense that the pipes have been installed from tanks to the plant or that sort of thing, has it?
No, sir.
So whatever piping has to be done for the asphalt plant, is that all going to be newly installed? Will it be will this pipe be newly installed pipe?
Yes. We'll have newly installed, some of the things, there are certain things that are in place. Everything is not. It is not an operational, functional plant right now. Additionally, Jason spoke of primary, secondary containment. We've shown on our plans, we're going to put concrete basins that you've all seen on above-ground tanks. Those aren't there when he was out there the other day. We were getting close trying to get some of the things ready, pole maintenance. We were told to cease and desist. That's exactly what we did. The county's come out and inspected. It sounds like made some assumptions when it's not done. We don't have everything completed. We don't have the containment. The pipes aren't in place. I don't know, he's a better man than me. I can't tell what's single and double-walled pipes by looking at them. Most of them are steel braid lined. I mean, everything is in keeping with OSHA, MSHA, all the requirements, the EPA. But most of the plants, the feed lines, there is no feed lines to the generator. Generator has a small fuel tank inside. It's contained in a trailer. The diesel tank that he speaks of is the burner fuel tank. That's what drives the aggregate. That feeds, everything's enclosed. We showed them that as well. It's all inline, neat, closed. The old burners that you used to see on asphalt plants that just glow in huge flames, that is all encapsulated. You don't see that. The asphalt lines go directly to the injection system on the downside of the drum, where that's added prior to going up to the silo. The diesel oil goes directly to the burner. We don't have lines going everywhere, et cetera, like that, but they're not all in place. That's kind of the long version.
Thank you.
Stay.
Yes, sir.
Nick? Were you going to add to what he just said?
A little bit.
Okay. Go do that
No,
first.
go ahead,
and
ask me your question.
Back to trucks. Are you currently operating under a truck trip limit?
Correct.
Is there any way that adding the asphalt increases the truck trip limit to what you are where you're permitted to operate under?
No, it does not. That's
Thank
the
you.
reason I came up here, was to explain yet one more time, because there seems to be an awful lot of confusion, is we have a permit that allows so many tons to leave that gate. We are not going to exceed that. We're not asking to increase that quantity. We're going to stay below or at those thresholds. It just is, it's going to be native rock or if it's going to be asphalt rock going out.
Is that why the net increase in truck trips that you have we've discussed is in the range of 2, 3, 4, whatever it is, from the liquid incoming?
Correct.
Okay, is that the end of this truck trip story?
I hope so.
Thank you.
Okay. Through this permitting process for CB Asphalt's plant, Ford Construction Foothill Materials has our own fuel tank on site for our current operations. This is a 10,000-gallon cement line, double-walled. You know, we have primary, secondary, and tertiary containment of that tank as well. We have not had any issues with it. It's permitted, it's inspected, we have rules and regulations to deal with it. It hasn't been an issue for 25 years. It's been there without issue. What we're adding is really less than that. This hot asphalt tank, unlike diesel fuel, when it hits the ground, as we've spoken many times before, is once it hits ambient temperature, it solidifies. It's not going to seep into the ground. Okay.
So are you going to continue to operate the 10,000-gallon tank as well as the 5,800?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That is Ford Construction's tank versus CB Asphalt's tank.
Got it.
Just clarification, what Ms. Kinderman spoke today, that it was a 12,000-gallon diesel tank and an 18,000-gallon asphalt oil tank. So, I mean, that's what was said earlier in the presentation, so.
That's CB Asphalt's tank. The
Yeah.
tank that Nick was referring to are his tanks. Right,
Which is not the 5,800-gallon tank, it's a 10,000-gallon tank.
right.
Correct.
It has not been part of this discussion.
Nope, it hasn't.
They're not at
'Cause
this
they're separate
location.
permits.
I should have brought
Right.
it up to confuse the issue.
That's okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And Jason, is there any summation that you'd like to make at this point regarding any points of discussion?
Before you go to Jason, could I ask Jason a question that, on a letter that we haven't discussed all that much? And that's the Dr. Kaleda letter of December 7th this year. It's one page that you relied on in part, right? I mean, this...
I work with him, I directly, him and I have a working relationship, and...
You asked him for his opinion on
Yep.
this? Okay, and he gave it to
And
you?
I shared it with him.
Okay. The letter, and I'm quoting, first paragraph, last sentence, last part of the last sentence, his conclusion, the potential for significant impacts and risks to the public have not been addressed to my satisfaction. And then he goes on, I should say his conclusion is in the next paragraph. In summary, after reviewing the plan and the additional information submitted, my determination is that the proposed asphalt plant poses a risk to the public health due, and this is the kind of the part that I have a problem with, due to the insufficient description of the safeguards to be used, et cetera, et cetera. So those two parts put together, his first paragraph where he says the potential significant risk impact has not been addressed to his satisfaction, and then he goes on to say in this next paragraph that his opinion is that there's a significant risk to the health, public health, due to the insufficient description of the safeguards. Now, how can the description of the safeguards, sufficient or insufficient, constitute a public health risk?
Well, Dr. Kaleda is not here, so I hate to speak on his behalf to go through what he's saying here. I think what he's looking at is that the plans that were submitted, and that with that there's still could have unintended environmental effects. So again, I'm not.
That may be what he.
I mean, we can go back and forth on what he meant to say. I mean, I'd hate to do that without the help of Dr. Kaleda here, so.
Okay, I just figured you would know what his opinion was because you relied on it.
Well, I think that but again, that he felt even with compliance, looking at the plans, there's still the potential and the safeguards, meaning looking at the rules and regulations, that there may be a significant effect.
So did you have other summation or comments?
Yeah, I mean, all in all, the Planning Commission has a hard decision before you. Staff, myself, presented evidence that was provided to us by the applicant. We're not against the project, but based on 035 and reviewing all the information and all aspects, not just focused on trucking, but all aspects, that our determination is that there may be a significant effect to the environment based on the processes and the information submitted to us.
All right, thank you. Peter?
I guess it's one thing I'd like to clarify in discussion of vehicle trips. There is no limit on the number of trips that the mine is operating under today. The mine was determined to be a vested mine, predated our requirements for use permit and smarter requirements. There was a request that was filed a number of years ago to increase the traffic, very good. And it was later determined that there was no established limit based on their pre-existing use, and therefore that request was unnecessary. So to my knowledge, there is no limit on the amount of truck activity that could be used, unless there's something that, either state or some other requirement that is not a county requirement.
Mr. Mauer, is there a tonnage limit?
Not that I'm aware of.
There is a tonnage limit with their current air pollution
Okay.
permit.
But not under the county's use permit process or anything under zoning.
Not under zoning, but there is an effective limit.
There's a 300,000 ton annual use.
On the
Under the air permit.
air permit.
Is that because of your SMERA permit or because of the county?
County air permit, existing county air permit for the quarry.
So converted to trucks, which they can do.
Okay.
And that makes sense.
And for the record, it's 25 tons per truck.
Okay, thank you.
All righty. Any other comments, Peter?
No, I think that we've pretty much addressed everything. Again, the question is, based on the evidence that's before you, your determination of whether or not this falls under the threshold established through 1714-035, and whether there may be a significant impact on the environment. If there is, then there is a conditional use permit requirement, and if not, then that requirement does not apply. As we previously determined, as the board agreed on appeal of your prior action, air pollution permit still requires CEQA analysis, and that will be done at such time as that application is filed. And I think, well, actually, the application's been filed. We've been waiting for this determination to move forward with the next step on that.
I'm sorry. I think I must have had a senior moment. We're going to vote on this resolution. And then, are you giving us the what-ifs?
I haven't been. If you'd like me to do that, I could do that.
I don't think
He
I need.
gave you what's going to
I
happen.
just hear what the status of the plant was what I was just referring to, that we still, the board concurred with the finding that an air pollution permit is discretionary. Because it's discretionary, it's therefore subject to CEQA. We have not yet made a final determination of what type of CEQA document is going to be required. And that determination, we're essentially waiting for
Yep.
this action.
The Kapahi report is pursuant to the authority to construct, correct?
No, that had to deal, that was with, they're interwoven. There's a lot of information.
There's a lot of overlap.
That we will be using as a part of the air pollution control district's permitting process. There may be additional information that will be necessary as we process the environmental document for that permit, but we're not there yet.
Okay, that was just one piece of it.
Yes.
The Kapahi reports, multiple. Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, so regardless of this action today, the applicant still has to go through a CEQA analysis with respect to air.
Correct.
Would it be fair to say that air is the biggest issue, environmental issue, that this project faces?
I think it's premature to make that determination. Obviously, that is an issue. But until we do scoping, initial study, we won't know the full effect of all of the potential impacts that might be out there.
Okay, I got it.
Discussion?
Well, I guess I can start because I'm on the end.
All righty.
We can let Annette go first.
I think I agree with Commissioner Allred that I think if I had my druthers, a conditional use permit would be a good thing to have because of the controversy here and the concerns that people have expressed. But I think our decision has to be under 035, and the question is whether the type, quantity, and method of use of these substances may have a significant effect on the environment. And I think the word may imposes a little higher standard than just could it, possibly. Or is there any ability, under any circumstances, to have a significant effect, even remote possibilities? I think that there has to be something more than that to make the finding under 035. Because there's a saying that, anything is possible. Maybe there's ground squirrels on the moon.
I happen to know.
So on the burden of proof, I follow county council's advice. But I look for evidence in the record to support a determination that the type, quantity, or method of use may have a significant effect on the environment. And when I do that, I look at the expert reports, the York report and the Kapahi report, and I don't see it there. I see the contrary, that there would not be a significant effect as to health, and that's both as to the plant and as to the truck traffic. Now, the 035 also does speak in terms of a significant effect on the environment, not just people's health, as staff has pointed out. But when I look at this stack of papers, I don't see any evidence of any effect on the environment in terms of fishes, flowers, you name it. It's not here. And so where I'm at, subject to hearing from my fellow commissioners, is I don't think I can concur with the 035 finding that the health officer has made.
I'm next, I'll go next. On the last issue that Mr. Wooster brought up, I agree with, and I would add to it in this sense. When you look at the effect on health, human health, my take on that is that that's the more sensitive receptor for any pollution consideration. That is by far the dominant receptor. And if you meet that need, then I think you've met the standard. If there is a potential effect, significant effect on the environment beyond that, fish, birds, flora and fauna, as you put up there, I don't see it in the report either. So if that was a significant consideration, then we should have heard about it. We would have heard about it. I agree that the standard of may have, cannot be within the realm of possibilities, within the universe of possibilities. It's not reasonable that we have to look at all ordinances, and lawyers and judges are used to doing this. They look at a law and they look at the intent, and they don't put reason on the shelf. They don't put common sense on the shelf. It's part of the equation. So when you apply that, it cannot be, in my mind, a standard that there's no possibility of an accident that would create a problem, that everything goes to zero when it comes to that. So that's how I apply it. So to my satisfaction, the 035 and my take on 035 and the requirements of the county to apply it have not been met by what I read, and I can only go by what I read. I also cite the expert reports by York and by Kapahi, who was working for the county at the time when he wrote his report, that there's no significant effect. Now, I understand that Mr. Baitzer has said, well, that was on the health side, not the environmental side, and my position is that the health side is this part of it, and the environmental side, it overwhelms the environmental side by virtue of its importance to the equation. So I will be voting no on this resolution. And I'm going to add another practical point. This is all going to go upstairs. This fight is not ended here. I think it's time for the Board of Supervisors to pick this up. They're going to have to anyway. All of the arguments before them and all of the evidence and all of the presentations, including public comments, are going to be repeated. And then you've got the potential for appeal, which is very, very real. So from a practical standpoint, I think it's time for us to kick this upstairs.
So, okay, I read these reports until I'm tired. On the first 035 hearings that we had, the biggest concerns were over the machinery, the operations, the drainage in hazardous materials. And so when I got this report back, I was digging and digging and digging, looking for anything on those findings that we went over, and none of those things were documented. It was an entirely new finding, and the findings that I read were there could be an accident. It wasn't that there was something bad about any of these components. The reports, when I looked at them and I looked deep, they referenced insignificant over and over again. So I'm going to go along with these two here, and we all know that health is the biggest issue, keeping in mind that we are going to be doing CEQA on the air pollution. So I don't think we're avoiding the public comment. I think that we know already that we voted yes to have the CEQA done on air pollution, and those findings will come forward and be addressed. If there's anything further, then we're going to hear about it. So I also will be voting no. It's your turn, Ted.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
As I mentioned earlier, that sometimes you have to get off the fence, and the only way you can go is down. You can't jump up very far. So I guess I'm in favor of this project having a conditional use permit from the beginning. But evidently, we cannot use the reasoning that I have, the fact that it's controversial. One of the disadvantages of living this long is sometimes you can remember what happened before other people were around. But I can remember about the first time, this has been over 20 years ago, I guess, the first time something came to the Planning Commission and that they wanted to handle it administratively instead of with a conditional use permit. And everybody went crazy, and including myself. And the planning director at that time, I can't even remember who it was now, I think I know, but I'm not sure, said that, well, this will only happen for those instances that are non-controversial. The kids after school want to have a 3K run on Mountain Ranch Road, that being a county road, they have to have a permit. So that was the kind of rationale that administrative use permits were used. Evidently, there's been some action by the board that makes a lot of other things come through now that doesn't go to the public. And I think the public has a right to know what's going on. And with an administrative use permit, there's very little public input, if any. And I think a good example happened recently, and that was that it came to the final vote of somebody wanting to become a dope peddler up the highway, and they got to do it administratively. And this room, the almost stacked in here. There were so many people, and some people looked around, see how come so many people on an administrative use permit? That's not controversial. Well, it is controversial, and it should be examined by the public. I think this is that way, but the legislation doesn't exist that causes that, I guess. So hopefully the board might consider changing the way they do that. But I'm afraid I have to vote for the administrative, or for the the administrative use permit and not conditional, just because there's no legal description saying we have to.
Well, there's no administrative use permit component to this. It's either a by right use or it's a conditional use permit. So in this case, it would be the by right permit subject to their quality permit.
Thanks, Ted. So I think that 035 was put in place to protect the public, and I think the wording of may was, on purpose. I don't think that we could say for certain that the operation of the asphalt plant will not have a significant effect on the environment. The whole discussion about, public health versus environment, I mean, we are a big part of the environment. I think that definitely the type, the quantity, the method of use could pose a significant effect on the environment, which would then put in place that public protection measure of a conditional use permit. And I think that the staff has shown evidence that that could certainly be the case, and that's not something that I could ignore. So I would also, like Ted, maybe for different reasons, but be in support of the Mr. Bozer's determination and the application of a conditional use permit.
I'm not sure that's what Ted said, but I was a little confused by it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't think I was in agreement. So I think Ted's comments and I were different, but we are in like mind for different reasons. So with that, is there someone want to make a motion, or?
Well, move that we vote on the resolution. But do we need a motion for that?
So it appears at this point that the likely action of the commission would be to grant the appeal, which would then require revision to the resolution, since it's the opposite of what staff has recommended. I think at this point it would be best, rather than try to craft the findings on the fly, that you indicate your intent, direct staff to come back with revised findings in the resolution based on the direction. We can bring that back next week. We have a meeting scheduled on the 17th. I think the public hearing is closed. We don't have to go re-debate the whole issue. The only issue would be is the language that we come up with reflect your determination. We've been taking fairly copious notes here in the last several minutes, so I think we have a pretty good understanding of the rationale for your decision, and can try to reflect that.
Doesn't a no vote on this produce the same result?
The resolution captures the decisions that were made, the tentative decisions that were made at the original hearing about some of the legal issues that were raised. And then there's the main finding that would change in this resolution would be number 3. So we would be changing on page 2 of the resolution, we would be changing, be it therefore resolved that the Planning Commission upholds the determination. So that would change. And then it's number 3 that deals with the issue of whether or not the environmental health officer conducted his analysis and basically properly determined that there may be a significant environmental effect. So that would be the section we would redo to concur with your findings today. And so, but to craft, the proper language to
So
make
you
sure.
want to massage the language so that a yes vote produces the result that you've...
Well, the vote would be to grant the appeal or to
grant the
deny the
appeal.
appeal. If you grant the appeal, we're reversing the decision made by the health
And
officer.
I guess my
If
saying...
that's called a yes.
A no vote on this doesn't do that cleanly?
I'm not sure what no means in this case. I would say a motion to grant the appeal or a motion to deny the appeal would be the
Is our
appropriate.
intent.
Yeah.
And then the resolution will be crafted to address the issue, so that we have findings on the issues that were raised, but the end result would be that the appeal is granted. And we would be changing what we've stated in the resolution with respect to the 035 determination, which was the fifth part of the decision tree.
Which is going to take a little,
Yea or nay?
well, yes,
would.
we're going to, but it takes a little time, so actually review the resolution at our meeting next week with the findings. But with what, I think, Peter, you've got the intent of the commission. Do you need any more information from us to?
I think it would be helpful to actually have a vote
Okay,
right
all right.
now, declaring your intent.
Okay.
And you can probably just refer to your previous statements as supporting that action. And then we will take that and revise the resolution to support
Okay.
the action that you intend to take. And then the final action will be done next week, similar to the way we did it back many, many months ago when this whole thing first started.
So perhaps, a vote on the intent to approve the
To
appeal.
grant the appeal.
Yeah.
Say that again, please.
Deny the appeal, or no, to grant.
To grant
To
the appeal,
grant the
yeah.
appeal, yeah.
Grant the
So
appeal of
I
the-
will
of
take
the-
let's take the vote on those commissioners that want to grant the appeal. That is your intent at this time to grant the appeal, which means,
The appeal by the applicant
Yes.
to
what?
opposing the Health Department's initial 035 decision.
what?
How is it? Tell me how you...
So the motion would be...
If I'm going to vote on something, I
yeah.
would like to
No,
know...
I-
So the motion would be to grant the appeal, or to declare your intent to grant the appeal, finding that there would not be a significant effect on the environment, based on
The evidence.
the evidence presented
Yeah.
today.
Okay.
So is there such a motion?
I'll make a motion to that effect.
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, 3 aye. Were you an aye, Ted?
Yep.
Okay. 1 opposed. Okay, all right. Okay, thank you very much. So next, we have another public comment period. Anyone?
On something not on the agenda.
On something not on the agenda that we haven't been talking about today?
For sure.
Bill McManus, the Calaveras Project. Stick around for the last 3 minutes that I can get in any one session. I just wanted to be clear on what my purpose was in giving you the documents
Wait,
this
excuse me,
morning.
I'm sorry, Bill, hold on one second. You guys, please, could you,
the-
we have someone speaking at the podium.
My first
Sorry, thank you.
intent was to try to do whatever I could to avoid the issues that are coming up being decided on an urgency basis just before the deadline. My intent was to do whatever I could to try to accelerate the process within a compressed time frame, because I can't do anything about time. It's moving on. Thirdly, my attempt at crafting this ordinance for consideration in no way reflects on County Council's office. It's strictly almost my volunteer effort to try to get ink on paper and maybe to accelerate the process. So I give it to you to look at. It's going to come before you. I hope that it makes it through, and the Planning Commission will be instrumental in doing this. I hope that alternative makes it through to the end so that the Board of Supervisors can consider it. And that was my purpose.
May I ask a question about this issue?
It's not on the agenda.
No,
so we have
I
to
don't
be
think
careful
so.
with that.
Okay, then I'm going to have to email planning on it.
Okay, whatever you
Okay.
need to do. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. All right, with that, we are adjourned till the 17th.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
In fact, let me just ask, and possibly